we are in a very critical time, I believe, in the history of Western civilization. And my friend Will Durant, who wrote the book, The Story of Civilization, by the way, and in this book, Our Oriental Heritage, which is volume one of that entire 11 book series, he says that every nation is born Stoic and it dies Epicurean. And it's my belief that the anxiety, the depression, the PTSD, a lot of the psychosis that's going on in America today, a lot of the fear, a lot of what's going on politically, a lot of what's going on that makes us scared and helps us to retreat into our subconscious mind like scared animals, instead of living as if there's tons of prosperity and that there's no scarcity. We've never lived at a better time in human history. I believe the reason why we've become so pessimistic is because we've lost a sense of our identity, right? And that loss of a sense of identity across the civilization has led to a lot of problems, right? How this affects you individually is that loss of identity has been passed down to you, and now you don't understand your place in the world. You don't understand why you're here. You don't understand what you're supposed to be doing. And as a result, without an understanding of those two very basic fundamental things, you can't ever really achieve the happiness that I believe God created you to have. All right, so we're going to talk about how to fix that tonight. But to talk about how to fix it, we got to talk a little bit about how we got here. How did we get to a place where, as a nation, we lack so much self-awareness individually and across the civilization? Well, I think if you just go back in American history to the transatlantic slave trade, that's as far back as I'm going to take it. You have a nation that was built on the backs of free labor, slaves, right? So there was already an ethical dilemma the way this country produced its wealth. And so in the worst states, I believe Louisiana was the worst. You can fact check me if you like. In the worst states, only 30% of the population could afford or were willing to own slaves. So even in southern states, most people didn't own slaves. Okay? But like the Bible teaches us, hastily gotten wealth will bring you to ruin. That's what I think America specifically is faced with today, because we built a lot of wealth uh, in a way that was immoral or amoral, and in a way that lacked any sense of direction in terms of ethics. And we're starting to pay the price of that now. So we built a ton of wealth, a ton of prosperity, and we developed none of the character to be able to maintain that, right? And so over the course of decade after decade, right, especially, and you especially see this play out when you fast forward from the end of slavery, obviously, to the Industrial Revolution, all the way to after World War II, where we start to just see spikes of prosperity, right? Sometimes the seeds that you're sowing take a while for you to reap the benefits. You had a generation of people going back to the baby boomers where they just had it nice. And they didn't really have to bleed for it the way generations before them, even during slavery. A lot of people still had to work by the sweat of their brow. And never before have we seen such unbridled prosperity without the character to match it in Western civilization. We've seen it 1,000 times play out in human history. Just go read the Old Testament of the Bible. That's what all the books, starting from Genesis to the prophets, are about, is all these kingdoms that started and collapsed because the people generated prosperity, didn't work on building themselves as humans at an individual level, which then affects the collective, and then the society crumbles. America will be no different, unfortunately. Because, like Will Durant says, every nation is born stoic, but it dies Epicurean. The bad news is, I think we have switched over to the Epicurean phase of our society, of our civilization. And if we don't start to right the ship, and this is why I've kind of been screaming from the metaphorical rooftops or hilltops, you've got to start developing self-awareness. You can't just go through life pursuing all of the dumb things that you were taught to pursue. Money, fame, right? Titles, the stuff, being rich and famous. All of those things are nothing. Like the ancient scripture says, what does it profit a man to gain the world but lose his or her soul? And I think as a whole, we lost our soul when we started behaving like the Greeks did in the New Testament of the Bible, which was they loved leisure and hated work. It's a bad place to be in because your prosperity, you will find it gone very fast. And I think that's what America's going through right now. And I'm trying to do my part, not to save the world, because I think that's a foregone conclusion. But if I can at least stop it from sinking as fast as it is and help enough of you get on this Noah's Ark thing, I think we get better for it. So we're going to be talking about the 5 pillars of self-awareness tonight. The idea that if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will never lose. All right, so why am I doing this? Pictured on the screen right now is a dear friend of mine named Staff Sergeant E.J. Patterson. All right, this was a young, very young, non-commissioned officer in the Army that was in my unit before I got there. Shortly after I got to my unit, I took over the unit that he was a leader in. I became the platoon leader, and he was one of my squad leaders, if you will. Right? So if I'm in charge of the group of 50 guys, he's in charge of 10 of them. Right? And he was younger than all the other NCOs, but he was a hot shot. He made rank very fast, and he was just an all-around awesome dude. He and I became friends over the time we were there, and I got to know his wife, got to know he had new babies, and he and I would start doing Bible studies together, all these great things. Fast forward, he eventually leaves the unit and goes to a different one. Me and my team end up going to combat, right? What I don't know is that when we leave combat, EJ's team is the one that replaces us on the battlefield specifically. Months later, I'm at home. My cousin comes up to me. He was another officer in the unit. He and I had gone to basic and had been stationed together and even fought the war together. My cousin comes and finds me at the headquarters, at headquarters, and tells me, he's like, "Hey man, I need to talk to you." I was like, "What's going on?" And he said, Patterson died this morning. And there was another Sergeant Patterson in the unit. I was like, "No, I just saw Pat earlier. What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, no, no. Your buddy." He was like, "He took an IED this morning in Baghdad." I was like, "I didn't even know he was there." He's like, "Yeah, the casualty report, I saw it. And I just wanted to let you know." So little did I know he was in the unit that replaced me and eventually lost his life. So the reason why I do what I do, because people always ask me, "B, how are you so motivated? How do you stay motivated?" And I tell all of you that motivation, it's nothing. It's not it's not the driving force behind everything I do. If you ever want to have motivation in your life, you've got to have a powerful, powerful desire. And one of the things that scares me in a healthy way, I don't mean like an unhealthy fear or anxiety, but I mean being scared, is I believe that when I shed this skin and I move on to the next phase of life, me and this gentleman and my dad, I used to put my dad in this presentation too because he passed away the same year I started doing this course. It was really dedicated to EJ and my dad. But the story got too long, so I was like, all right, here we go. One of the fears, one of the things that scares me is one day in eternity, he and I are going to reconnect. And he's just going to ask a simple question. No judgment, no condemnation, all love. But hey, man, what did you do with the rest of your life after I left? And keep in mind, he left behind a wife, kids, family. I got to come home to mine because he took over the part of the fight that we were doing. I can't have a bad story to tell him. So if you want to know what motivates me to get out of bed every day and do good for other people and try to help, it's these guys, man. The guys that didn't get to come home deserve, and I can name off the top of my head 10 other people that I know personally very much like him. They deserve me to give my best because I was given the gift of more time that they weren't, and that's the way it played out. So I owe it to them to live my life to the fullest and try to help as many people as I can. So if you ever wonder why I do what I do and why does he teach so many free courses, why is he helping all these people, what's in it for him, this is what's in it for me. Is one day I got to face this guy and I better have a hell of a story to tell. Let's get into it. The 5 pillars of self-awareness. Okay. Now, if you were in my coaching course, I would have had you take some tests before you got here, but don't worry about that. I'll tell you what the tests are and you can go take them after the fact. But the first pillar is you have to know who you are. And one of the best ways to know who you are the psychological tools that are available to you. Things like the Big Five, which is now evolving into the Big Six, or the Hexaco test, and that's HEXACO. And for my folks on the podcast who are listening, that is Hotel, Echo, X Ray, Alpha Charlie, Oscar. Okay, .org. If you go to that website, it's going to give you an awesome tool to help you understand genetically predisposed personality traits, not types. Okay, a lot of you come here, you've used tools like the Myers-Briggs or the color test or the Enneagram, where they're trying to bend you into these, holes, that these pigeonholes that you're supposed to fit into. The reason why I stick with the Hexaco test is because they're going to tell you about traits that all of us have, and this has been culturally studied across the world to make sure that there's no cultural bias with the test. If you want the book where all the studies are explained, I'll tell you what the book is too. If you're curious, we can do that in the Q&A. Podcast listeners, you can just shoot me an email or hit me up on Facebook or TikTok. Okay? So the Hexaco test is going to show you things like how honest and humble are you, right? Meaning, do you have a lot of greed avoidance? If you're a billionaire, you probably don't score very low on that, right? If Do you have a lot of sincerity, right? Do you have a lot of forthrightness, right? And it's going to score you, and then it's going to compare you to all the other people who've taken the test. And then when it gets to the E, or emotionality, do you struggle with a lot more anxiousness, neuroticism, the fear-based emotions, dependence on other people, right? Sentimentality, like sending people Valentine's Day and birthday cards, which I think is ridiculous. Obviously, I score very low in sentimentality. Right? Then it's going to move into the X, or extroversion. How extroverted are you? But it's not like a Myers-Briggs test where it's you're either an extrovert or an introvert. No, it's how much social boldness do you have? Right? How much social self-esteem do you have? How sociable are you? Like, are you a very social person? Do you like going out? Myers-Briggs is typically going to ask you a lot of questions about, after work. Would you rather go read a book at home, or would you rather go to happy hour with your friends? Well, what that doesn't take into consideration is that extroversion is not just, there's many things that can add up to extroversion. Right? If you tested me, I'm going to read the book every time because I think happy hour, I'd rather have rabies than go to happy hour and hang out and small talk with a bunch of people I'm probably not interested in, right? And watch them drink while I drink water, right? So it's going to show you things about yourself that are going to help you understand, right? So for example, if I look at your test and I look at your scores in the C, conscientiousness, and the O, openness, I can predict with a very, very small margin of error what your political affiliation is. And what you have to understand is that part of the political leaning that you have is genetically given to you at birth, right? You didn't just hear what a politician said and said, that's my story. I believe in that. It's you believe in that because you have a genetic predisposition, right? And evolution has shown us that diversity keeps us alive, right? So, for example, if you score really high in C but low in O, I can predict pretty easily that you're a conservative, right? That you're probably leaning Republican, right? If you score really high in O and low in C, you're probably liberal, right? And don't care too much for Donald Trump. If you score really high in both, you think, or really low in both, you probably think both of those parties are ridiculous, right? So tests like the Hexaco, tests like DISC, DISC, that's Delta, India, Sierra, Charlie. For those on the podcast who are listening, can't read my lips. The DISC test will help you. And I even do encourage people to take the Myers-Briggs test because if you've never taken a personality inventory, it's a very good starting point. All I would tell you is if you're going to take the Myers-Briggs, one, take it with a grain of salt. Don't use that test or that tool for things it's not designed to do. It's not going to tell you what type of job you're supposed to go get, right? I mean, it can tell you basic stuff. Like if you're off the charts extroverted, you're probably not going to want a job where you have to sit quietly in a cubicle all day long for 9 to 10 hours a day, right? That would be torture for you. But it's not going to tell you, oh, since you're crazily extroverted, you should be a lawyer. Like a lot of these tests online will try to predict that, and it's just not a good idea. In my opinion, and in my experience working with people, right? What it will tell you though is your temperament, right? And the test will teach you all that. I don't have to go over that here, But your temperament will show you how you process information and how you make decisions, right? Meaning, do you process information through pattern recognition or what we call intuition, right? Being able to kind of see the future from what you understand about the past, right? Or are you more what you can see, taste, touch, and feel is how you process information, right? And by the way, you do both, you're just stronger in one or the other, right? And the same thing with how you make decisions is, do you make decisions based on outcomes first or people first? Or are you balanced? Right? So instead of, getting your four letter code and saying this is exactly who I am, understand where you fall on the spectrum. All right? So these types of tools are going to help you understand who you are. Now, if you look at my personality type, I have the picture of General Leonidas here. He kind of embodies my personality. I don't do as much screaming as he does. Like just the random yelling at different situations, but the heart that he had in that movie, definitely I relate to that. Okay, so knowing who you are is the first pillar, and understand out of these five pillars, they all build on each other. All right, so keep that in mind. All right. What, my friends, are your core values? Right? What is your North Star? What drives your ethics, your beliefs, and your ideas? Right? What drives that in your world? Right, and most people don't necessarily they can't just recite, here's my core values, here's what I believe in. What I encourage people to do to satisfy this pillar and to understand it is to find, like, just Google core values for businesses and just read some of them. There's also a great book on my shelf behind me here called Traction by Gino Wickman. There's a whole chapter, or part of a chapter, dedicated to the core values of different companies. For example, I took my own advice when I was trying to figure out my core values, and I took the Army's core values, right, which is an acronym that spells leadership, or loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Right, all of those apply to me, and I thought, well, what would I add to that? What type of thinking, what type of ethics would I add to my core values? And the reason why you start with understanding who you are is the tests that I'm giving you. The other test I would tell you to take is called the dark triad. Is those tests are going to show you kind of your baseline 80% of what makes you you genetically. That test is going to reveal to you, right? And then 20% is your social upbringing and that stuff. But the test is going to show you the foundation of what you are at a genetic level. Understanding your core values as you stack these pillars on top of each other, or next to each other when you're building the building, is this is your North Star. This is what drives you. So when you read, you can't read it now because the camera's so small and it's in green, but when you look at the purpose on my wall, it makes a lot of sense, right? That almost everything in my life's purpose has to do with helping other people. Well, I score really high in conscientiousness. That makes sense. I also score, this test also measures your altruism level. I score a 5 out of 5 in altruism, right? I also score very high in openness, right? So I'm not just all conscientiousness. I pick yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm like, yeah, and help people that need help tying their shoes, right? So I'm really balanced when it comes to those things. And that's what helps me figure out, okay, what are my core values? Does selfless service mean something to me? Hell yeah. In the military, it's me, it's we over me. That's where I get the catchphrase uh, from, my brand, which is "We are stronger than I." I didn't that didn't happen on accident. That's fundamentally what I believe in. Right now, the we isn't everybody in the world, because some people aren't going to get it, and you don't want certain people in your circle. But the we that you've chosen to run with, your pack, your tribe, right? That's the we over me. Does honor mean something? Sure, I should treat people honorably. Does personal courage mean something? Hell yeah, because we live in a world full of cowards, right? And people having the personal courage to stand up to the cowardice that usually leads to tyranny and oppression. It takes somebody that has personal courage to do that. Loyalty. Yeah, I got to be loyal to the people who've helped me and pay forward the good things that other people have given me. Right? Respect. That's huge. I may not like you, I may not care for you, but I'm going to respect you to the level that you show me that you are you deserve respect. Now, if you're being completely disrespectful, I may respectfully tell you to go jump off a bridge, but having what I mean by mutual respect, and that's a huge one of my values, is if you believe in God and Timmy over here is an atheist, you should both respect each other's views. And respect also means I'm not going to try to force you to see it my way because I'm really being honest. I don't know everything is right. Even though I may have been conditioned to believe that this is right and this is what God said, or, this guy's over here screaming that there is no God. It's like, wait a minute. Figure out what's right about what both of you are saying instead of attacking what you think is wrong, right? And I've actually done videos on this with, I had an atheist ask me, how can you and I be so similar in our personality traits? But he was a complete atheist. He's like, you sound like you're a guy who believes in God. I said, well, um, you have to understand that those two types of people aren't all that different. I said, but there's merit. One of the reasons why I get along with atheists so much is what I respect about atheists, for example, that a lot of religious people don't have is curiosity. They want to know more. They're willing to question things. They're not just going to read the Bible or whatever the book is of a particular faith and say, that's exactly the truth, exactly the way it's written, and I'm going to believe everything in it because I'm afraid, God's going to throw me into a black hole that's just burning people to death forever. It's like, well, I mean, can we ask him questions before we jump to that conclusion? Right, so there's some merit there. But the bottom line is respect is huge. And what you've got to figure out is what are the core values that drive you as a human soul? And if you don't know these things about yourself, right, if you don't understand who you are, your core values, and the other things I'm going to show you, you're not going to know how to make decisions properly to serve you and to serve the people you were put on earth to help. All right. Now, this is one of the parts of the course that's changed. Because what this used to say is what are your motivations? And I don't like that word because once I started working with people on the internet, they listen to motivational speaking and they listen to these motivational videos where some NFL player gets his leg chopped off and hops for a touchdown or whatever. And that stuff's great to get. I still watch the Rocky 3 montage, the beach montage. That still gets me hyped. That's not going to get me out of bed tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock to go get ready to work out, right? It's nice, but that's not going to push me. And what I realized that most people were struggling when they tell me, yo, B, I don't have the motivation to do what I'm supposed to be doing. And I figured out over years of working with people, motivation isn't the problem. You don't want anything bad enough. You don't want something bad enough to bleed for it. You don't want something bad enough to die for it. Because when you get there, you get Braveheart, right? Willing to die, publicly murdered in front of a bunch of people to get his greatest desire, which was freedom. Now, we used to call it the 4 M's of motivation, but we'll just call it the 4 M's of desire. What do you desire? Do you desire freedom above all else? Freedom to come and go as you please and to do what's important to you? Right? Or do you desire to be respected and to be the best at what you do, like to be the Michael Jordan of your world, right? So I just named momentum and mastery if we're talking about the 4 M's of great desire, right? Or do you desire to be loved and admired by people? Do you desire to have a significant other in your life who cherishes you more than anything? Then that's the desire of mating, right? Or the fourth one, do you desire to have things that make you feel good about yourself? A nice house, right? Or like me, farmland, where and even my dream of a farmland is still about helping other people, right? But I'm gonna have a nice house on that farmland, no question, right? And I've talked about having a game room for my game collection because that's like my one hobby besides books, a library, my office, and then my wife can have the rest of the house. I don't care, right? But that's the M of material. And for God knows how long in human history we've been beat over the head like, materialism is evil. It's not evil. The only way having nice things becomes evil is when you're willing to exploit or hurt other people as a shortcut to get to the thing you want. But if you having a Ferrari is going to then push you to help save the world or cure AIDS, then yeah, make Ferrari your goal. That's fine with me, right? But you've really got to tap into what are your greatest desires as a human being. And when I ask people this, they usually don't know the answer. What's your greatest desire? What do you want? What do you want? When you're dead on your deathbed, what's the one thing that if you don't accomplish it, you're going to feel like a complete failure? Right? And that'll usually give you some insight into what your greatest desires are. But I can promise you, without great desires, you will have no motivation. You will also have no discipline, which is way more important than motivation, because motivation gets you started. Discipline and habit keep you going. And in order to keep going when you are tired, when you are hurting, you guys see me on TikTok all the time doing these hill sprint workouts with a broken foot because I desire to have a certain level of health that's going to keep me healthy for another 80 years on this planet so I can help more people. Right? What gets you out of that bed? Motivation didn't get you out of that bed. Desire will get you out of the bed. So quick exercise to help you understand where you are. If I asked you, and you guys can leave comments, those of you who are watching live podcasts, you can just jot it down to yourself. If I said you can come work in my company, like Tony, right, works in my media company. If I told Tony, hey man, you're going to work for me for the next 10 years, I'm giving you two choices. You can work with me for the next 10 years, and I'm going to pay you $1 million a year, easy, right? I said, but here's what I'm going to guarantee you. You're not going to like the work that much. It's going to go against some of your personality and some of the things that you want to accomplish that are more creative. It's going to be really tedious work for 10 years, right? But I'm going to pay you $1 million a year, no questions asked, and you can't quit. You have to work the whole 10 years, right? And, so would you take that job is the question I would ask to somebody. And the answer to that question is if you would take the job, then you are more motivated, or you desire more to have material than you do to have individual freedom. You're willing to sacrifice your own desires in the short term, or things that you like in the short term, in order to get access to this money. For example, I tested my family. A number of my family members were like, yeah, I'll take the job. I don't care. I can stand on my head for 10 years. If it's going to give me $10 million and I can go sit on a beach and not have to deal with you clowns, give me the job. Most people ask that question too, like, no, never. I have to do something I believe in and I love. It's like, okay, then your greater desire is freedom. Same scenario, right? Or similar scenario. You're going to come work in my company. I'm going to pay you $1 million a year. You have to stay there for 10 years. You have to stay for 10 years. You can't quit. But I'm going to pay you $10 million a year, and you're going to like the job. This is your dream. You're going to live it up. But you can't have sex for the next 10 years. No mating, no girlfriend, no sex, no boyfriend. Then what would you say? And the way you answer that question will show you, do you desire material and a little bit of freedom too, because you're going to love the work? Do you desire material and freedom more than you desire mating? And mating doesn't just have to be sex, right? But sex is the easiest way to do that. So you can give yourself little tests like that help you understand, who am I? What are my core values? And what do I want? Right, so if you tested me, I would not take either one of those jobs because I value material least out of the four. Right? My greatest desire, which is why I chose Braveheart for the picture on the screen, is freedom. And then mating and mastery are probably tied. And then material, I truly believe when you're doing something that gives tremendous value to other human beings, it may take you longer, but eventually the material has a way of showing up. And it has in my life. Material has a way of finding its way to you when you're doing the right things. But if you care more about the material, if the Ferrari pushes you and you got to have that Ferrari, you need to listen to that signal. Right? Because if you start pursuing other things when you really want to have, and Ferrari is probably a bad example, but you really want to have these material possessions that give you a sense of happiness and a sense of accomplishment, don't ignore that. And when I give this course live to live groups, I always ask, who's the one person in the room that's the material person? Without fail, there's always one person. Me. And it's oftentimes it's a lady, which is really interesting. And they'll be like, it's me. And I said, are you encouraged now? Because I just told you being materially driven is not evil. It's okay. If you're driven by a great desire to have nice things, as long as you don't exploit other people for it, get in there. And if she knows that about herself, then she can say, let me pursue the material because that's going to make me happier. That's going to make me a better worker, a better servant of other people, right? I have a friend that's exactly like that. I can't do work that I don't believe in. I will suck at it, right? I have to have freedom, or what we call momentum. That's the M, right? The M's of desire. She has to have them. She's like, dude, I don't need purpose and all that crap. Cut the check, right? Two different people. All right. So you have to know your greatest desires. If you cannot tap into what your greatest desires are, you're going to be lost, right? And you're not going to know how to make decisions to reward yourself to stay in the fight when things get hard. All right. Now, what are your unique skills? And these bubbles are supposed to have stuff in it, but don't worry, I'll tell you what the bubbles are supposed to say. All right, so unique skills is where we get into the more practical part of your 5 pillars of self awareness. Because everything we've done up to this point, especially the first two, are kind of esoteric, right? They're who are you and what are your core values? Those are things that are hard to nail down. It gets a little bit more practical when we get into the what is the greatest desire, right? You need to be able to, and that's why I use 4 different blocks, because certainly you could list 70 M's of great desire, but they pretty much all fall into one of those categories: relationships and connection with other people, um, having material gain, having freedom or momentum, and then having mastery. Right? Everything that you could possibly want falls under those 4 categories. By the way, you desire all of them. Let me be clear with everybody that's listening to this. You have a desire for all 4. What I'm asking you to do is rank them, right? So if I go back to that slide for just a second, I'm asking you to rank them in order. Like I told you, mine is freedom or momentum, and then probably mating just above mastery, like being the best at what I do, because I want to be the best at what I do because of the access it gives me to human beings. Right? Like for years, I thought mine was momentum, mastery, mating. Or actually, I thought it was momentum, mastery, material, and then mating. And then when I really started to evaluate myself, I was like, that's not right. It's momentum, yes, but I actually desire the human connection more than the money or the material. It's not just money, more than the material and the mastery. And when I started to figure out my desire to be the best at what I do is longing for that human, people wanting to be connected with me and admiring the things that I'm able to do. Right? Not for fame, not for, I don't need a statue and, and fields named after me, just so I can do something that connects me to other human beings that I want to be connected to. All right, your unique skills. If you're a note taker, get ready to write. At the top of the stack there, these 4 orbital balls circling the middle one. Here's how this works. Each one of these 4 circles represents 4 ways of defining your skills. I'm going to tell you what they are. This is called the Eulerian destiny. So in that one, if you want to start at the left or start at the top, I don't care where you start. I'm going to start at the very top. This one right up here at the very top is what were you raised around? What did your mom and dad or the person that raised you do? Right? So if we're using me or you, if we're using Tony as an example, right? His parents are entrepreneurs. He was raised around entrepreneurship. So he's going to have a natural inclination toward owning a business. He's probably going to be motivated a lot by and have a great desire for freedom or momentum because he was raised by people who obviously value that. I don't know any entrepreneur who doesn't value freedom, right? And that's what he was raised around, parents that own businesses. So he can pretty much take it to the bank that he's going to have some of that DNA in him. And I don't just mean biologically, I mean socially. He's raised around people where he's going to understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, probably better than someone like me. If Tony and I were the same age and I didn't have, decades of experience because I'm older than him, but he would have had a leg up if he and I were running the same race because I was raised in a military household, right? I was raised around artists and warrior monks, basically. Like sage, warrior, monk, philosophers is what I was raised around. So naturally, I'm going to have an inclination to being a skilled warrior, but also being skilled in philosophy, skilled in history, skilled in communication with other people, because you don't become a leader of warriors if you can't communicate, right? So great communicators uh, and like warrior monks. The next circle, whichever one you choose, and we're going, clockwise here, but fill it out how you like. The next circle is what are you insanely curious about? So the way I help people understand what you're insanely curious about if you don't know is, let's pretend just for a second that you got forced to go to that horrible happy hour I was talking about when I was describing the Myers-Briggs test. If you were there and you had to talk to other people, what could you comfortably talk about for the whole party? Something that interests you greatly. What are you insanely curious about? Right? And so think about those things. And you guys can totally, the people that are watching this live on YouTube, you can write it in the comments if you're listening to this on the podcast. Just write it, write it down on a piece of paper or on your phone, however you want to do it. What are you insanely curious about? Right? So if you used me again as an example, I'm insanely curious about philosophy, human nature, psychology, what makes other humans tick interests me more than anything on the planet, right? Understanding what leads to the behaviors, what leads to what humans do. And some of that is instinctual and it's learned because I grew up and found myself in social environments where I felt like I never fit in. So I needed to understand how to understand things like social currency, right? Because when you are the black sheep of any situation, you better quickly understand what the social currency is if you want to survive that environment, right? Like when I was working on Capitol Hill, you understand that these some of these egomaniacs are driven by wanting to have their asses kissed. You better learn how to do that properly if you want to. That's why I didn't stay in that environment. I was never good at that. But what are you insanely curious about? What things could, if you were going to have a conversation with me, you don't know who I am, but if we got into a conversation, what could you comfortably talk about with me for hours, right? Write that down. Number three is, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? Now, for my younger listeners, right? If you are, let's say, 28 and younger, the last 10 years you may not have been doing a heck of a whole lot. If you're 28 and younger, some of you are still in school, so you've been doing school for the last 10 years, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing, right? This is a tool that you need to be using. I go through this tool. Well, I teach it a lot, so I get to go through it all the time because I'm taking other people through it. But what were you raised around? I'm sorry, not what were you raised around. What have you been doing for the last 10 years? Right? If you're older than 28, chances are you've had some type of career. You've been doing plumbing or carpentry, or you've been running a business, running someone else's business, building your own business, being a freelancer. Some of you might be athletes, right? Whatever it is that you've been doing, you might be a coach. Think about what you've been doing for the last 10 years, right? And typically, what you would be filling into these circles aren't one-word answers. In the last 10 years, you know, right, let's see, this is 2020, so the tail end of running a billionaire's company, building my own, running my own, uh, communications, media, entertainment and game reviews. With a media company, we did a whole bunch of things. We dipped our toes in a lot of areas, but communications, leadership development, coaching, business coaching, life strategy, business strategy, stuff like helping businesses with their strategy, facilitating businesses to unscrew their operations. That's a huge thing that I've been brought in to do a lot in other companies, is come in and find out why they're broken and then help to unbreak them, like actually get them something on paper that gives them a clear path to go from our business is a hot mess to now our business, if we do these things, we can bridge that gap and our business can run properly, right? So think about, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? I've also been, and think about not just career things, right? I've been raising kids. I've been married. You know what I mean? For the last couple of years, I've been taking care of an elderly person. Not they're not incapacitated, right? But I have a senior citizen living in my house, right? That we care for, and that we moved her here for that very purpose, so that we could put her in a better environment than what she was in. So just think through, what have you been doing the last 10 years? And then the last one is, what do strangers compliment you on? Right? And you can jot those things down. You can leave me a comment if you're listening to this. My man Kip says, I'm insanely curious about everything, which is great. That's also to encourage Kip. He already knows this, but for the rest of you, if you're insanely curious about everything, you're probably a genius, right? Because genius is correlated with high, intense curiosity, right? So if you're not insanely curious about, like, I don't know that I'm insanely curious about everything. I'm also not as much of a genius as Kip is, so there's that. But, and I mean that. I'm not even being facetious. That's for real. But, think through. What are the things? So, what are you curious about? Or what were you raised around? What are you curious about? What have you been doing the last 10 years? And what do strangers compliment you on? And so that's important. And write down as much as you can in each of those. And what goes in this middle circle, right? If I were drawing this properly, do I have it handy? I probably put it away on my shelf, so I won't be able to show it to you. But if I've done a one-on-one coaching session with somebody, we go through this in detail. Like we spend a whole, in some cases, 2 days just going through this 5 pillars of self-awareness, because there's a deep dive. They got to take the test. We go through every facet of the test to help them understand what everything means. But I hold up usually on a dry erase board. It's concentric circles. And what you want to do is find out something in all the circles that connects, right? So I was raised around leaders. Okay, I'm going to show you how it works. I was raised around a lot of different stuff, artists, warrior monks. But if you wanted to boil all that down to something important, I was raised around leaders. If you want to know what I'm insanely curious about, it's developing leaders. That's why I study psychology and human nature. I am insanely curious about how a human being becomes the best that they can possibly be, and how do I get the greatest potential out of another human being, right? So leaders, I'm insanely curious about developing people to be leaders. Do you see a theme here? What have I been doing the last 10 years? Coaching leaders, mostly business owners, but I've also been consulting business owners, like coming in and either doing a service for a business like marketing. For example, I've done social media marketing consulting for a number of different organizations, from Department of Defense to, I did some side work for the Washington Redskins that I didn't really get a lot of credit for, but that's okay. um, so I've been consulting, I've been working with entrepreneurs, been coaching them, been helping people, right? But I've also gotten really skilled in communications, got really skilled at operations management and helping businesses un-F their operations, right? And then, what do strangers tell me I'm great at? Man, your voice is awesome. You sound like The Rock. You should have a podcast. You should make content where you talk to people. So, ta-da. Here I am talking to people about how to take command of their lives. You see how that works? So it comes down to, I was raised around leaders, so I'm good at that. And I know what qualities it takes to be a good leader, right? And then I'm insanely curious about helping develop myself and other human beings into the highest, like, how do I take a human and turn them into the God they were created to be by God, right? Like, if I had to boil it down, and in order to do that, you have to be a leader, right? Because if nothing else, you have to lead yourself, even if you're not leading other people, right? What I've been doing for the last 10 years, helping people and businesses not suck at things, right? And then, what did strangers tell me I'm good at? Acting, talking to people, and using my voice. So I use my voice to help develop leaders in businesses and veterans and first responders, in some cases artists, entrepreneurs, into the best them that they can be, so that their life becomes awesome, and then that spreads usually over into their business productivity, right? And so what you find out is that circle, the center circle, the destiny, is where all four of these things meet. Right? So when you can find out where all four of these things meet, now you understand, at least at a very basic level. It may still take, if you haven't been doing this your whole life like I have, it may still take you some time to figure out the exact details. You may need to do some writing and some soul searching. But now you don't have to come to me on social media anymore saying I'm lost. I don't know what to do with your life. And every person that tells me, and this has never failed. I'm waiting for the first person to tell me I'm wrong. It's never failed. I've talked to millions of people on the internet. Now I haven't told millions of people this because I'm sure it would have failed. But it's never failed. Someone will come to me, yo, B, I'm lost. I don't know what to do with my life. And I say, that's BS. And then they look at me like, what? No, I'm telling the truth. I get that you think you're telling the truth. I'm just telling you that you're wrong. You are not lost. You know exactly what you want to be doing. You're just scared to actually do it. Like, you've got a clue. You may not know exactly what it looks like, what company you're going to go do it for, but you've got at least a little bit of taste. Now, keep in mind, most of the people I talk to are in their later 20s and older, right? And I've coached. The youngest person I've ever coached, I think, was if you're counting career and business coaching, was 17. Tony, I think he was 17 when he and I started together several years ago. Uh, and the oldest person I've coached, I think, was in their 60s, right? But none of them don't at least have a taste of what they want to do on this earth. Most everybody is just too scared to pursue it because their parents told them some BS lie like there's no money in art, or you shouldn't try to be a professional athlete because you should go get a safe job, as if that's a thing. Look at all the people getting laid off during the pandemic. Like my family, I'll tell you a crazy belief my family had: just go to college and then get a government job because it's safe. I'm like, you bastards get furloughed every year you get sent home. Like, how is that safe? Like, you're getting a guaranteed unpaid vacation every year. Like, so do you plan your finances around when you're going to be sitting on ass at the house? All right, so there is no safe. You have to understand there is no safe, but you can make yourself strong. You see where I'm going with that? And every time someone's like, I'm lost. You're not lost. You just haven't yet developed the courage to do the thing you know deep down somewhere in here you're supposed to be doing. And if you're a really young person, you don't know exactly what that is yet, but you can taste what it is. When I was young, I believed it was playing in the NFL. But if you just take that, I believed it wasn't, that wasn't my destiny, but what my destiny was to do things that millions of people would benefit from and allow me to make connections with awesome people, which was the reason why I wanted to be in the NFL. I wanted to be on television doing something that other people could not do. My therapist will tell you that. He's like, you have an obsession with doing, he's like, you get bored when you're asked to do things that are pedestrian. It's almost like the part you miss about war is that most people can't do it. Like, hell yeah. Yeah. Me and my inner circle of local guys that I came up with, and business friends. We've been talking about going to this seminar. We've been talking about going to this seminar in Ireland, where I think it's like $10,000. I don't care how much it costs. Like, it's a horrible experience for anybody that's not like us, because you go there and you get beat the hell down like Navy SEAL Hell Week. You don't get any sleep. You work from 8 a.m. to midnight. You have to earn privileges like going to the gym. Like, work out in your room until you prove you're not a complete piece of crap, right? Like, and I was just talking to one of my boys. He's still in the military. I'm like, dude, we got to go to this seminar just to get the ass, just to remind ourselves that, we're still lions, man. Like, we're getting older, but we still got this. And most people could not get through. If you watched my TikTok from earlier, if you follow me on Instagram, I posted a video where it was from his seminar, where the picture said, now you guys forgive my language. You cover your kids' ears if you're listening to them. I'm just telling you what happened. He was standing in front of the screen that he was teaching from, and he said basically what the slide on the screen was a baby screaming, and he says, if anything, it was the intro, if anything in this seminar offends you, blame your parents for raising a P word. And so when he sent that to me, he called me on the phone. We couldn't stop laughing. I was like, that's a perfect description of what we pride ourselves in, doing things that nobody else can do. because that's what drew us to the military in the first place, right? That's what made me want to be an NFL player. And all my friends that played in the NFL, like, dude, you could have made it if you would have had, a little bit more discipline when you were younger and more, confidence in yourself. You weren't going to be Jerry Rice, but you could have been on a team. But what I found out was I didn't want to be. I wanted to be on a team, and I wanted to matter, and I wanted to do something that people looked for me to do and could depend on me for. So what's your thing? That's all me, but we're here to talk about you. What is your thing? None of you are lost. Some of you may need some breadcrumbs to get back on the path, but you're not completely lost. You just haven't figured out yet how to articulate that deep, burning desire that sits right there in your spirit that you can't put words to. The more you go through this exercise, you'll be able to do it. And once you've put all these four pillars together, who are you? We talked about take the hexacode test. We talked about take the DISC test, DISC. We talked about taking the dark triad test. That'll tell you how much of an evil person you are, right? And you could take Myers-Briggs, you could take Enneagram. I always encourage everybody, take them all, right? But those first three are the ones I think are going to be the most valuable for helping you make life decisions. The other ones will give you some type of insight into who you are and how you tick, but I wouldn't use those as really strong deciding points for like career and relationships and things. Right? What are your core values? What's your North Star? What is your driving ethical force within you? Right? You got to know that, because if you don't know your core values, you will pick careers and relationships with people you have no business being in. Right? One of my core values is to do what's right, no matter how much it costs us and no matter how much we have to bleed for it. If that's true, right, you would never want to go work for politicians because you're going to compromise the hell out of yourself. Now, if your core value was to have a lot of status and be an important person, then working with politicians would probably work well for you. But if you go to work in that space, you go work in some of the places I've been on Capitol Hill, if that's what you want, you're going to have to be willing to compromise, or at least not feel remorse over compromising something like doing the right thing no matter what. Right, so you got to know that about yourself so that you don't end up in places where you feel lost. Because I guarantee you, all of you that are telling me you feel lost, part of it is a lack of knowledge. Part of it is you're off course. You didn't know where to make the turn in the fork of the road because you didn't know yourself and you didn't know your core values. You also didn't know what are your greatest desires. I need to fix this last slide. All right. What are your greatest desires, not what motivates you? What are your unique skills? Right? What are you actually good at, the practical side? Then when you put all four of these things together, you know your purpose. And purpose is what matters infinitely in your life. You have to know. I don't care about your passion. And that's why I changed this slide, because this used to say passion. Right? What's your passion? Just follow your passion. People say if you know your passion, you never feel the pain of a rainy day or whatever platitude. Pick some silly platitude that some online, seminar guru that just took ideas from church services to make you guys jump all over the place and sing songs instead of actually doing the work, right? What is your purpose? And if you know who you are, you know what your core values are, you know what your greatest desires are, and you know what your unique skills are, you're going to know your purpose. And purpose matters a million times more than passion, because passion will fade. And you'll find that when you're doing your purpose, when you're actually doing your purpose, you will never find yourself to be more happy or more passionate about what you're doing. And it won't matter where you are. As long as you're in a place that supports you, supports your values, supports your desires and your skills, you're going to have a sense of purpose, right? And then eventually, if you do it long enough, it will lead to it being a passion. I always use Steve Jobs as an example at this part of the talk, where he was never passionate about computers. He was passionate about design and people loving the things that he created. He just happened to apply it to computers, but he did it long enough to become passionate about computers. Your purpose matters more than your passion. All right. And if you pursue your purpose long enough, you'll find more passion than you know what to do with. And that, my friends, is the 5 pillars of I was going to say of epic shit. The 5 pillars of self-awareness. Don't forget to do epic shit. What are your questions, my good friends? And you guys have been chatting it up. I'm sure I missed a lot. Podcast family, you can go ahead and hang in there if you like, or if you don't want to listen to the Q&A session of this, you can go ahead and shut down and move on to the next podcast. But I will warn you before you shut us off, the Q&A when I do these types of presentations are usually the most valuable part. Right, and now for the YouTube friends, I'm going to put my face back on the screen so you don't have to look at bad stuff. Propaganda Panda says, that actually sounds like great experience whether or not I do well. Aaron says, DM me on Instagram. Okay, they're talking amongst themselves. Excellent. Good night all and God bless. Early day tomorrow. Got it, Coughlin. Do your thing, man. I'll finish watching this tomorrow at some point. Cool. Josh says, good night, good night, good night. Are you posting this video later? Absolutely, Nancy. This video will be on YouTube later. So as soon as I'm done running my mouth, YouTube will process it and get it uploaded for your viewing pleasure. It will also go into my 69 Pillars of Success course, which is the free course on YouTube, which also goes into my paid course, which is the Good Life Playbook. I will replace the 5 Pillars of Self-Awareness video with this one, with the updates. All right. What are your questions, good friends here? Adam Bell says, I'm insanely curious about everything. I'm insanely good at reading people and predicting their future. What fills my nuts is setting up dark tetrads to fall on their own swords and finding true love. Okay, cool. That sounds pretty deep. Nancy says she was married for 9 years, been single for 4 years now. Okay. All right. John says, so I'm curious. A lot of people here are listening and learning and taking this to heart, and hopefully they will use this lesson to better themselves. But what if you run into someone, what if you find someone with no motivation or drive to better themselves? Okay, so if you find someone in your life that doesn't desire to better themselves. Now, John, to be specific, are you talking about having a mate or a friend that has no desire to better themselves? Is that what you mean? Because I run into plenty of people who don't want to better themselves. I spend this much time with them. Kip says, Bryant, you're a rock star. I have to go feed my tribe, but sincerely, oh, dude, you're the rock star, brother. Thank you, man. Much love to you, man. We'll talk soon. I'm still going through all the stuff we talked about, brother. We're going to come up with something great. For sure. Okay, great question. Caitlin says, what are the 3 tests for answering who we are again? Excellent question. So we want to take, in fact, if Tony was here, he could type it out for me, but I'm going to give him to you. All right. So the first thing I'm posting here is the website for hexaco.org. That's the Hexaco test. That stands for honesty and humility, emotionality, X for extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness to experience, and it also measures altruism. Right? And it's going to give you this huge printout that tells you how you score in all of those categories and give you some idea of what that means. The other test is called, I don't have a link for it, but you can just Google it and the test will come up. It's called the Dark Triad test. All right, and then the DISC test. I need to capitalize that. Okay, so those are the 3 tests that you could take. You can also take the Myers-Briggs test. You can also take the Enneagram. There's a color test. I don't remember what the name of the color, like you're a green or a purple or whatever. Take as many tests as you like, but those main 3 that I'm talking about here on this call are the ones that are going to be the most useful in terms of helping you make life decisions. That's what I focus on, right? And to include relationships and stuff. Like a lot of people like to use Myers-Briggs for relationships, but it's problematic for the same reason people who are obsessed with what are they called, horoscopes or the astrology signs. Like I could never, my mother-in-law is into that stuff. I could never date a Pisces because Mom, come on, that's it. Stop it. Like talk to people. Like I'm waiting to meet the first person who based their entire marriage decision on the star sign stuff and is insanely happy, right? Because of the star sign, not because of the actual measurable elements that make a good relationship. Like people are obsessed with personality conflicts being what leads to relationships falling apart. It's never, well, I won't say it's never personality conflicts because it can significantly affect a relationship. But two mature individuals can adjust their personality to fit each other if they're committed to one another. Let's see. Okay, so John says, uh, hold on, let me go back up. Sorry about that, John. I don't want to leave you hanging. So you're saying, long story short, you have a friend who refuses to better themselves, and I've distanced myself from them. But I'm curious as to where do they fall in the. Yeah, so you've done the right thing. Distance yourself. I won't spend time. I won't spend legitimate long periods of time with folks who are not trying to make themselves and other people better. It's just our DNA is not going to match, right? And one of the things I didn't mention during the video or during the lesson part was when it comes to relationships specifically, people focus way too much on personality differences, like this person's an extrovert or this person's an introvert. You need to focus way more on values, right? One of the things that makes me really, really hard to love or hard to like for most human beings is that I value education over entertainment, and I think fun is overrated. Now, I have fun. I do fun things, right? I talk about video games with wealthy people. Like it's not that we don't have fun, it's that it has its place and then we get back on trying to help people, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with people who are always putting themselves down, not reading books or listening at least to books or podcasts that are making their lives better, that aren't serving other people, like it's just all about them. Not like I'll spend time with them, like, if it's a person that I love, I won't completely X them out of my life because that's not good either. But like the people that get the bulk of my time are people who are working to better themselves and the other people around them. Period. So I think you're doing the right thing, at least if I'm understanding what you're saying here properly. And how can I help them if it's not possible? You can't help somebody that ain't trying to help themselves. I don't care how good you are or how persuasive you are. If that person doesn't want to put in the work, you ain't helping nothing. And I had to learn this lesson the hard way because I tried because I have a big heart or whatever it is to help people who don't want to be helped. And sometimes it's like the Matrix. That's why the Matrix was so important to me. It's like you're trying to help people that are going to start fighting with you for helping them. And it's like, all right, bump it. You gotta. That's why there's this scripture: "Don't cast your pearls before swine." And that's a harsh thing to say, but it's the truth. Like I'm not trying to help nobody. That like Joel Salatin had a line when I went. Either I heard it from him when I was at his farm, or somebody quoted him saying it. He says, "I'll carry a man, but don't drag your feet." Tiana says, "I think I want to start a nonprofit community that offers community and mentorship to people who strive for mental wellness." How does that pitch sound to y'all? Okay, so I'll give you my 2 cents, Tiana, and let me phrase my response in the form of a question. Why? And hold on, before I ask the question, let me be honest and say I am biased, typically against the idea of a nonprofit, because I think companies that make a profit, I just my bias is I never want to be at the mercy of somebody else's charity. Like if people want to help me, all in, right? If people want to give me their charity, all in, I will accept it. But I won't allow my success to be dependent upon someone else's charity. Like I just think you could do way more as a profitable business than I just think the whole nonprofit world. And I've worked with a couple nonprofits, and I've watched some of them struggle really hard. But I also partner with a nonprofit which I wholeheartedly believe in and support what they're doing because no one else is doing it. Now, would I have built that company as a profit company? Yeah, but that's me. My question to you is why do it as a nonprofit? I think the mission that you have sounds great, but why nonprofit? Why not make a profit and make more money so that you can do more to help other people with those resources? John says, "Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well, to be honest. But I wanted to ask you too. See if it made the right choice. So yeah, don't worry so much about the right choice, right? Make choices, look at the results, and then just make an adjustment if you're off course, right? I think in today's society we focus too much. Was that the right or the wrong choice? Well, make the choice. And this is something you see that I've seen. The two types of personalities who do this the best are battlefield leaders and billionaires. Is they make decisions and they live by those decisions, and they're not necessarily worried about was that the exact right decision, because if it wasn't the exact right decision you can always make an adjustment, right? Now that requires you to be smart, like you're not making stupid decisions, but it's don't worry too much about was that the right call. You'll know. You're going to get results from the decision as long as you didn't do something catastrophic. uh, you'll know if it was the proper, and I like to say optimal decision. Did this decision lead to the results that you wanted? If not, then figure out where you need to make the adjustment. Adam Bell says, I disagree with that. People who aren't trying to help themselves have often just been devalued their whole life. That's all they know. It's hard. Yeah, no, Adam, again, I think you and I have a habit of talking around each other. I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. And I'm saying physically, like if you've ever worked with a person who has, let's say they have a drug addiction, I don't care how much you love them and you want to help them until they get to a point where they are willing to admit that they need help and are willing to accept it, you ain't helping them. I don't care what you say or how good of a friend or how much you love them. We don't disagree at all. I agree with everything you just said is 100% right. Most people who are struggling, it's because they came from a struggling and they need a hand up. But you got to grab my hand. Like I can't get you off drugs. I can help you learn some things that hopefully will get you off of drugs, but I can't do it for you. It's just like if someone comes, yo, B, I'm out of shape, man. Can you help me get in shape? Yes. I'll stay in this gym for 4 hours if you want to. But if you don't sit your big ass on this bench and start lifting weights, I can't make it work for you. Right? I can't. So I don't think we disagree at all. I agree with everything you just said. Childhood trauma and abuse have programmed me to be ruled by a mood disorder and PTSD. My fundamental disconnect is leaving the symptoms in my wake. Fundamental disconnect is leaving the symptoms in my wake. I desperately want to overcome the DNA I was given. Okay, so Nancy, my question to you is: are you working with like a professional psychiatric person who can help you deal with some of those things and give you some of the coping mechanisms and tools? And I would also change some of your language, right? You don't need to be ruled by any of that. You are experiencing the symptoms of having those disorders, but like when I made the video on TikTok about PTSD, PTSD doesn't rule me. It just affects my life and I have to adjust the way I behave accordingly to get through it or overcome it. Right? It doesn't rule you. So I would start to change your language and the story you're telling yourself, because some of your challenges are coming from the story that you're telling yourself about it. Tiana says, it will be for people like me who struggle with psychological instability. Charity is the only way I'm able to access the resources I need. Why? Who told you that? Who told you that charity is the only way you're going to get resources? Yeah. But, I don't want to get hung up on whether you want to. I'm always curious when people want to start nonprofits versus going and getting somebody to invest in an idea and building something that has great value that you can get a profit from, that you put the profits back into the business to help more people. And so that, like, for example, I support one of the local nonprofits in my area that helps the homeless. They are struggling right now because, the state and the county that I live in have kind of ousted them with their own programs. And so they're finding it really hard to get the donations they need to keep the doors open, and what they do is so important, right? Like I volunteer there to mentor the young kids that they work with, but Like if this was a company that could produce, imagine if Amazon wanted to build the project that you're talking about, they could stand it up in a week because they could throw $1 billion at it and be like, there it is, bam. The Center for Helping Kids with Disorders, the Jeff Bezos Center. You see what I mean? Like having access to profit means that you can weather the storm of when people's pocketbooks dry up. But again, that's my bias. I don't like that. I personally don't like being at the mercy of other people's charity. I like to have more freedom and control. John says, it's true, they devalued Annabelle. Drug addiction is the perfect analogy here. Sometimes you got to let the junkie get to rock bottom. Yeah, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is you cannot actually be of service to them until they're at that rock bottom place that you're talking about. Like, no amount of John giving this guy advice. I'm not saying John should leave him in a ditch for dead. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying if John is wasting a lot of time trying to impart the message of you need to better your life to somebody who's not listening until they're ready to listen and actually implement, you can't help them. How can I change my patterns so I can be the person I want to be, but I seem to be afraid of? How can I change my pattern? Well, one, change your language, right? Your thoughts are going to follow what you talk about. It just is. So you got to stop talking. I mean, Adam said it before I did. I just saw his comment. I didn't read it because he's talking to you, but he's right. Like you got to stop saying you're not ruled by any of this stuff. You have PTSD. It does not rule your life. I have PTSD, chronic PTSD. When I get into a hypervigilant situation, which is very often in my life, I have tools that help me navigate the world despite the fact that a hypervigilant situation is kicked in. I have coping mechanisms that stop me from yelling at my kids. And I'm not yelling at them because I'm angry. I'm yelling because I'm a freaking scared animal who thinks I'm in a firefight because it sounds like the house is coming apart, right? Which can be it can trigger remembering explosions, having RPGs blow up 10 yards from where you were standing. So it just the chaos screws with me, and so I know I got to get the first thing I have to do every day is get my ass up and work out. Then I have endorphins and I have stuff in my system to combat the hypervigilance that's just there. And my doctor told me like this is going to be your reality, dude. So just you've got to learn how to live despite the fact, but I'm not ruled by it. I'm not like, oh, I got PTSD, and now that gives me permission to go start screaming at my kid. You know what I mean? You're not ruled by it. That's just a story that either someone told you or you've bought into that's not true. The other thing, too, is you need to surround yourself with people who don't allow you to get into those dark places, which is kind of what Adam was getting at with being there for people who are struggling. I'm not at all advocating that a person who's a drug addict, you just kick them in a ditch and, let them die. I'm saying that until they're willing to accept that they need some type of help, there's very little that you can actually do for them other than love them, you know, and let them know that they're loved. There's not much you can do to help them kick the addiction is what I'm saying specifically. And so same thing, you need to get around people who specifically get around people who have been through your struggle and have learned to manage it, who can show you. So like my docs and counselors have given me very specific coping mechanism, practical things that I mean, I keep a journal. Specifically, like when I get into my head really hard and I can't sleep, I'm supposed to write. I'm supposed to write so that I can get the thought out of me and get back to resting, get back to my life. Right? Psychological and financial instability. I got you, Tiana. You're cool. I'm able to access therapy despite being broke. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, 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 I do. There's in my area, there's doctors that'll take you off the street for I think it's $25 a session. I think that's what my doctor does. Actually, she'll see people without insurance. If you got $25, hell, you can go on the street and beg for $25 if you don't have any money. Take you about an hour to make an hour or less actually. to make that much money, you'd be all right. Uh, and sadly, I did waste a lot of time because she was my best friend, but I had to accept that she didn't want to listen to what I offered on how to be better. So I let it go and focus. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, you're not like kicking this person out of your life. You just need to be careful that the time you're spending with them is not influencing you in a way that makes you go backwards. That's what I'm getting at. I still spend time around folks that aren't working to better themselves, but it's very limited time because I'm usually wanting to be around people. Like you guys heard me talking to Kip earlier. I like being around him because he gives me these ideas and expands my thinking beyond some of the things that I'm thinking about now, and makes me stronger for it. Right? Let's see. John's okay. I read that one. Nancy says life has been more challenging, and I had a very close friend commit suicide at the beginning of February. But yes, I see a therapist. Okay, good. So, do you feel like your therapist is actually helping you walk through some of these things? What does he or she say when you say you feel you're being ruled by PTSD and these other disorders? How do they respond? John says, and the worst part is she knows she needed help and still, yeah. I mean, that goes back to what Adam was saying with the drug addict. If they're not at rock bottom, you can know you need help and still not admit it, and still not do anything about it, man. Adam says, 100% agree. Very, very well said. And Nancy, these are dark times for many, but you are so far from broken, you just don't see it. I agree with Adam. Bryant hit it right. You actually want the help, and you definitely can help yourself, right? So, yeah, it's the thing. Like, it's if you're seeing your therapist, are you able to get that honest with them where you can be vulnerable and say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with? Like one of the things my therapist has been helping me with is transitioning from this kind of warrior persona to more of a magician persona. If I'm using the Carl Jung personas as examples, where it's the warrior could only take me so far. The warrior can't do all the stuff that's on this board, right? The warrior can do the second bullet, uh, but he can't do the other three, right? That can only take him so far. Narrowing down what I want to do is what I find to be the hardest. Okay, great. So here's what I want you to do, Gretch. Write down on a sheet. I want you to write it too. Don't type. I want you to write. There's something. It's not spiritual, but there's something mental that happens when the hand has to write things. Write down all of the things that, and you could do it while we're on this call because I'd love for you to read it or copy and paste it. Write down all of the things that you're having trouble prioritizing, and I can help you come up with a way to find the ones that matter. All right. Or what I will probably end up helping, I don't want to spoil it for you. Just write the list, and I got a cool way to help you with it. Uh, Nancy says, thank you so much. Thank you, Adam. Yeah. Yeah. Adam's on point. It's like Adam, I was saying it. I didn't realize Adam made the comment so fast. He's 100% right. You have got to stop saying you're ruled by that's because that'll become your reality. It just will. It's how the brain works. If I told myself I am, if I told myself I'm Dwayne the Rock Johnson for the next 20 years, and I say it every day, every minute of the day, 20 years from now, you'd never be able to convince me that I'm not Dwayne the Rock Johnson. Now I'm not him, but in my brain, you would not be able to convince me that I was wrong. And so if you're going around all the time talking about how you're ruled by these things, you're right. You are ruled by them to the degree that you keep admitting that. You've got to break the cycle and stop saying those things. John says, man, this was awesome. And I wish they would have done things like this in school. You and me both, man. I would have got A's in school if they would have taught me stuff like this. Uh, but admittedly, I was a C student, despite how smart I may sound, because I read books by people way smarter than me when I talk. I had one psychology class, and I loved it. We always had combos like this. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Adam says, like I said, anytime, shoot me an email if you like. Cool. Yeah, and you guys, feel free to connect with each other. That's something I've always done on the internet since before social media. When I was running my own website, was tell people make friends, man. Get to like make this into a community, not just a place where you come listen to me run my mouth for 4 hours at a time. Uh, Living the Dream says, any advice for interacting, dealing with someone with low self awareness and emotional intelligence? So, living the dream, the best way for me to answer that question, because that's too broad for me to give you any advice, that's not going to just sound like an empty platitude. Give me an example of a situation you actually had, and let's talk through how to actually approach the situation. Because depending on the context of the situation, I may tell you to do something differently, right? Without that context, I'm going to be flying blind. Adam says, so true. People talk about their condition like it's a parasite on them. My BPD, my anxiety, my. Yeah, it's crap. It's a self narrative that put. Yeah, it certainly does. You know. And in fact, like I even start talking more about symptoms than the disorder. Like I deal with hypervigilance. That's a current reality. But it's I'm not controlled by hypervigilance. I have people, I have doctors and stuff that help me learn how to deal. And to be honest with you, hypervigilance helps me. Like if you can really start finding the positive aspects of some of these things that we call disorders. Hypervigilance keeps me safe in a lot of situations. I'll give you an example. I went to cover kind of a local idol of mine, a musician. Some of you have heard the story, but you haven't heard it in the context of PTSD. He hit me up. He's like, "Hey man, you coming out to the show this weekend to do the article on our band?" I said, "Yo, listen, man, I got my wife with me. I know where you're playing this weekend. I'm not taking my wife to that neighborhood, dude. Hell no, I'm not coming. Let me know when you guys play somewhere that people ain't getting shot up." And he's like, "B, check it. Here's the deal." I said, I would come, but I'm going to be hanging out with my wife that night, and I'm not bringing my wife there. Like, I don't mind coming because I can get out of danger, but I'm not going to subject my wife to it. He's like, "Listen, my whole band's going to be there. All of us." He's like, "Bring the wife because I want to meet her. I've never met your wife. And for real, if someone even looks at your wife wrong, I will clear the stage with my whole band and we will collectively whoop this dude's ass. Like you have the backing of the whole club if you come out and hang with us." And I'm like, "All right, bet, let's go." And so I'm there. I'm just taking it all in so I can write the article about the band. And he comes up to me during what's called the bands in my area. They do what's called halftime. So they play for an hour, they take a break, let people get drinks from the bar, and then they go back up and play for another hour. And so during halftime, he comes off stage like, "What do you think?" I was like, "Man, you guys rock. You sound really, really dope. So don't worry, the article's gonna be great." He's like, "Hey man, you got a 16 ready?" And for people that aren't, musicians, he's saying, "Can you come up on stage and rap with the band?" Because the band didn't really have a rapper. He's like, and so having a 16 means, do I have 16 bars of a rhyme that I could come on stage? He can give me the cue, and then I can do my thing and move the crowd. I said, "Yeah, man, I always got a 16." He's like, "Come on up stage. Like after halftime, just come up with us." So I'm up on stage, and I'm grooving with the band. And then he lets this other dude perform first, which I was like, "You can't have me go after Roz. Roz is the best showman I've ever been on a stage with, bruh. You can't have me follow him. I look like it would be like if Sylvester Stallone was rapping after Tupac. Like, why would you do that, right?" And so anyway. I finish. I dap up my guy. I said, "Look, man, I gotta go." And "Look, man, I gotta go" was hypervigilance because it was starting to get to that bewitching hour where stuff starts to get stupid in bad neighborhoods and clubs. I got my wife. I said, "Get in the car." She's like, "We're leaving." We are leaving. 30 minutes after I left, I was talking to my boy, the leader of the band, and which is a guy that I looked up to as a kid. He was probably 20 years older than me. And he's like, "B, I'm glad you left when you did. This dude got stabbed outside afterwards." So having chronic PTSD, and I didn't even know I had PTSD at that time. I was just living my life. I was struggling in a lot of ways, but I just thought that's what life after combat was. I thought that's how you're supposed to do it. My hypervigilance was, let's get the hell out of here because I can smell danger. Because I've been in places where people were trying to kill me before. And sure enough, I got out of there before a guy got stabbed. Turns out me and my wife did not get stabbed. So you can start to use your, disorders and accept and embrace them for what they are. There's signals going on inside your heart and your brain trying to tell you something ain't right. Right? It's not always a bad thing. to have, like, I think about all the symptoms of PTSD. I sometimes have, I've been getting them a lot more lately, like combat nightmares. But here's how I look at that in a good way. Combat nightmares are me processing things that I experienced, you know, literally or figuratively, and my brain. So I heard somebody say one time that dreams are the way the brain tries to solve problems. That it either thinks you're going to deal with or you're currently dealing with. It's like the subconscious, unconscious brain trying to solve these hard things that you're wrestling with in your life. And so a lot of my combat nightmares deal with me being in danger and me being alone, which, being in the civilian world after having been a combatant, a lot of us feel alone, right? And so it's my brain trying to reconcile what that means. And then you start to realize the truth. Wait a minute, I'm not alone. Like, even in some of the dreams, like the dream I told you guys about, where all the people attacked the vehicle I was in, and I took all kinds of, I mean, I was taking bullets like a champion, and somehow I lived in the dream. All those shots in real life, I don't know how I would have survived it. No body armor, nothing, just getting lit up. And I remember it was my brother who was on the phone with me, who was also a combatant, and he was talking me through staying awake so I could drive myself out of the situation and get to help. Right, so it's, you could look at, oh my God, I had this terrible nightmare, or I could say, or my brain is starting to process these things that I've been through. Right, so there's some silver lining to what you're dealing with, to where it doesn't all have to be the woe is me. You can start to use these disorders really as fuel to empower you. Right, and I think that's important. We don't talk enough about that. Like, my doc told me, yeah, these dreams sound a lot like you trying to reconcile with institutional distrust that you've experienced more out of the military than in the military. I was like, yeah. After I left the military, I dealt with a lot of people I would never follow into battle because I wouldn't trust them. They're too self-interested and too much of a coward. And when I say coward, I'm not trying to hate the person. This just, they lack the personal courage value that we talked about in the core value section. And going back to what Adam said, they don't lack personal courage because they're horrible human beings. They've just never seen it modeled in front of them, and no one taught them how to be brave. Right? So I empathize with some of these people that I call cowards. I'm not saying it because I resent them or hate them or want them to hurt. It's just I'm calling a spade a spade. Right? So just don't think of don't take the approach where you get victimized by your problem. Make your mess your message. Gretch says, whatever I do, it needs to be with people. Okay, that's a good start. Whether it's teaching or helping people, that's an even better start. All right, I've tried to go to school in the past twice. I do not do well taking more than one. Okay, so maybe school's not for you. That's great. All right, so you're off to a good start. You know that you have a lot of extroverted energy, so you want to be around humans, and you want to help humans, whether it's teaching them or helping them do something that they can do better because you're helping them. All right, and you don't want to necessarily go to school for it, at least not a contemporary school, because school isn't your jam. That's great. That's good self-awareness, right? Now, if I was your parents, I'd probably say, well, Gretch, sometimes you gotta just do what you gotta do. Like, no, you really don't. I didn't go to college to learn how to develop leaders. Learn how to develop leaders by doing it for a very long time. There's no college course that's going to help you develop leaders better, right? There's college courses that can teach you the principles of leadership, but until you go out and use them, currently you're working as a home health aide. Oh, okay, cool. So you are definitely essential. So do you get fulfillment from the home health aide, or what would you rather be doing to help people instead of home health aide? Because it sounds like that's not necessarily your dream or what's gonna ultimately make you happy. John says, so I'm a young guy and I want to know what would be some good books to start reading for philosophy. Okay, so for philosophy, hands down, read The Story of Philosophy by Will Durant, right? And then get the 11 book set of The Story of Civilization, also by Will Durant. Then get The Lessons of History, also by Will Durant, and get The Greatest Minds of All Time, also by Will Durant. Those 11, 12, those 14 books will change your life. Because the story of civilization is an 11-book set. As far as self-help goes, I would just read Psycho-Cybernetics. That'll be enough to Psycho-Cybernetics. I'd also read Turning Pro, The War of Art, and Do the Work. It's a trilogy of books by Stephen Pressfield. And you just read, what did I just give you? 18 books. If you just read those 18 books, you'll be ahead of everybody in your life for the rest of your life. I wouldn't stop at those 18 books, but it'll put you way ahead of your contemporaries. Living the Dream says, I'm struggling with an example that is easy to communicate here. How about advice for responding to logical fallacies during a discussion? All right, there we go. Or shutting them down. Don't. You got to remember, when someone is using a lot of logical fallacies or they lack emotional intelligence and they're coming at you, their problem isn't with you. Their problem is with something they see in your reflection about themselves that they don't like. So if they got to convince you that you're wrong, don't argue. It's like that old proverb. You see a genius arguing with an idiot. You don't know which one the idiot is. Walk away. You don't need to be right. Who cares? Right? Don't let your ego get in the way. Let them be right. I tell people all the time. People say the dumbest. Guys, I reach millions of people on the internet with the content that I produce. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that to set up this next statement. People say dumb stuff to me all day, every day. And it usually warrants two responses: silence, or, huh, that's interesting, and keep it moving. I don't need to argue with somebody that's ridiculous. Why? Just walk. Yeah, that's an interesting idea you have, man. Thanks for sharing that with me. And walk away. There's no need to argue other than your ego, right? And that's an emotional place you don't want to go. I mean, for you, here's your book. Blam. Ego is the enemy. You don't need arguing techniques. You need to stop arguing with simple-minded people. That's why I was telling one of my boys on TikTok. I was on an Instagram live with him, and he's in a group of people that have been doing all these debates. I said, I got a lot of respect for you debating people. I said, that's a young man's game. I can't be debating nobody. I got kids. I don't have enough energy to sit here and try to prove a point that I don't even 100% believe in to somebody who's totally bought into their whatever their ideology is. Like, it's fine. Have your ideology, man. As long as you ain't running for office and trying to change my world to agree with some crazy thing you're saying, it's fine with me. Like I said, Ku Klux Klan want to burn a cross. As long as you burn it on your yard, burn it up. I'll even sell you the firewood. You burn that thing on my yard, gunshots. My favorite sign. Somebody asked me, dude, what's your sign? My sign is trespassers will be shot. That's my sign. And I lived in a place growing up where that sign existed. Like, trespassers will be shot. Not prosecuted, shot. And then probably prosecuted if you live. All right. Yeah, Nancy, use it as a superpower. Exactly right. I tell my son all the time he has dyslexia, and we're taught that's a learning disability. And it's a teaching disability. But fortunately, he has amazing teachers to help. I said, but brother, your dyslexia is your blessing. He's like, how is that, Dad? I said, because you got to work twice as hard as all your friends just to do some easy stuff. That's going to make you stronger. That's going to give you more patience, more resilience. It's going to give you more empathy. I guarantee you, compare your life at 18 to their life at 18 and look at where both of you are. Dyslexia is your gift, not your curse. Right? Chronic PTSD, people are like, oh, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry for me. I'm grateful. Grateful of the empathy, the strength, the patience, the struggle that I have to go through to do simple stuff. It's like Snickers and Cinnabons. I love it because it makes me a stronger human being. Right? Without that struggle, I don't get to be stronger. I get to be normal. I hate normal. Like, think of all the superhero stories. All of them have some fatal flaw, nonsense that happened in their life that nobody wanted to deal with, but everybody wanted to be the superhero. You don't get to be the superhero without the scars. It doesn't exist. You don't get to be Batman without the parents getting murdered. Doesn't exist. What you think is a curse is actually God's grace, and it's a gift. Right? You just got to learn how to use it. Adam Bell says, he's so right, Nancy. Your trauma gives you insight and power if you find it and nurture it. The courage comes with confidence, and the confidence comes from objectivity. But yeah, 100%, man. Preach it, Adam. Well said. Living the Dream says, make your mess your message. Is that your tagline? Did you come? I did not come up with that saying. I don't remember who originated. It was a woman, though. I don't remember who was the person who coined that phrase. But I think the first person I heard it it attributed to was like a woman who was a poet or something. It wasn't Maya Angelou, but it was a woman that I learned that from. But I don't remember who it was. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you, but no, that's not mine. Nothing's mine, guys. I have zero original thoughts and ideas. And the good news is, same for you. We're all just mirrors of ideas that have been passed down through our DNA for about 150,000 years. Living the Dream. Okay, I read that one. Nancy says, use my PTSD as a superpower. I'm very good at reading people. Of course, right? You become crazy empathetic when you deal with different types of mental psychosis, right? Pain makes you very empathetic if you're not a psychopath. You know, that's what made Tony Robbins who he was his suffering, right? For the people he's helped. Gretch says, helping others communicate or learn. Sorry, no, it's vague because you're still trying to figure it out, right? Don't be sorry. Guys, you never have to apologize for anything you say here, okay? This is a place for you to come, ask questions, get your ideas out. All your ideas are safe, right? You're good. You don't have to apologize. Helping others communicate or learn. Okay, great. How would you make that more specific? Whom would you like to help communicate better? Like, think of your dream scenario. You're helping somebody communicate better. Who is it? When you think about it and you dream about it and you daydream about this help you want to give people, who do you see in the daydream? Right? Let's go on the journey together. You'll get there. That's what this course is about, by the way. By the way, if you've never been through this course that I just taught, this is your first time going through it. The more you go through it, the more clarity you get to that question. I still take this course because I get more and more clarity. Like this purpose I was able to write on the board in about 18 seconds. You know how many years it took me to get to these points of self-discovery and trying things and them not working and blah, blah, blah. It was a very different list of things when I first started this. All right. John says, challenge accepted. But can I get it written? I can't write that fast. Got you, man. Nancy says, make your mess your message. Yes. Those are invaluable skills. So if you have that, get with Bryant. He's someone who can help set you up with those talents. He's clearly a pro ass facilitator. Thank you for the compliment. That is true, but thank you for the compliment, man. I know a few with dyslexia. It forces you to readjust and develop talents that are rare. Yes, my son is a freaking genius if he would use his brain. You know, and I just try to help him, dude. This thing you think is a curse is a blessing. Like you're struggling to do math, good, while everyone else is lazy because they got through everything so easy. You're gonna have to work hard for simple stuff. That's it. And I was dyslexic too. Am. I'm not as severe as my wife and my son, but I definitely have it. I used to read. I never used to read like comics, like books, but I used to read the standalone books where each page was a self-contained story. Kind of gives you some insight into why I love Star Trek: The Next Generation and not Game of Thrones, because I don't want to read a whole story. I want the story to be self-contained on one page. But when I would read Heathcliff or Family Circus, these one-page comics, it was a book of one-page comics. I'd read it from the back to the front. Like I thought it was completely normal that I'm reading the right page first and then the left, right? So I'm either dyslexic or Japanese, or both. Uh, Tiana says, I have dyslexia too, and ASL is all much easier to learn. Yeah, for sure. I think all dyslexics should learn. Yeah, my wife and I have been actually working with that. Kip says, I've fought, befriended, and taken my demons to lunch. You think I fear this? Well said, Kip. And welcome back, man. And that's the thing. And listen to what Kip said here, guys. I'm going to read that again so you can hear a voice say it. I fought, befriended, and taken my demons to lunch. You think I fear this? And the perfect, like, if you guys ever watched The Walking Dead, I couldn't get through it because that show is ridiculous, but I do know a little bit about it. If you think about Michonne's character, she grabs the zombies and chops their faces off and then use them as weapons and as defense, right? So the thing that everybody's terrified of, she masters and uses it on the battlefield to her betterment, right? So it's when you go to war, you deal before the war starts, you deal with a lot of anxiety about dying. But I remember I think 24 hours before my first mission that I went on, it just cleared. It just went away because you finally get to the point where you accept I'm dying anyway. Whether it's here or somewhere else, it's inevitable. So sitting here and being afraid of it is doing me no good. And this isn't something that you consciously do. It happens. This is why there's that scripture, I think it's in is it Philippians where it says be anxious for nothing but in all things through prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God, and the peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So when I read scriptures like that, it's very different than a person who just goes to church. I've lived that. I've lived making my requests known to God. Help me help my men finish this mission and get home to their families. Thank you for helping me do it. Right? Being anxious for nothing, but in all things I made the prayer with supplication, with thanksgiving. And now the peace that surpasses, like there's by the peace that surpasses all understanding, meaning I shouldn't have peace right now. I am 24 hours from having Scud missiles and everything else launched at my ass that allegedly might even have chemical weapons that even with my gas mask will reduce me to a convulsing heap of death, right? And somehow I'm not afraid. I'm scared. Like I'm scared in the moment. Obviously, I'm nervous, but I'm like, let's get this thing going, right? And it just hits in the midst of your greatest fear. When you finally stop running from it and you embrace it, you find your greatest courage. And then death is a joke. Like I don't know any combatants or any gladiator entrepreneurs, right? I'm winking at Kip right now. Who I don't know anybody who doesn't believe this saying that on this earth there are worse things than death. Like sitting in a cubicle for 9 hours a day to me is worse than dying. That's my story, right? So it's when you've had to overcome the struggles you guys are having to overcome. I'm not saying you're looking at it wrong. They are hard, but don't become the struggle's victim. Master the struggle and then use the struggle against itself. And then use the struggle against everything else. Like what like someone's gonna step to me in the streets mad. I remember I was consulting in a place, God knows how long ago. It's over a decade ago, or maybe about a decade ago. And the director of this company walks out and sees me walk in the halls. I don't remember what I was doing, but she stops me. She's like, "You notice, I always notice you were smiling. Why? Like you're people around here are so depressed." I was like, "Well, people around here are spoiled." I said, I won't say her name. I said, "Dude, nobody's gonna shoot at me today. God willing, no one's gonna fire a rocket propelled grenade at me. So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this is a great effing day. What's everybody so sad about? Dude, I've seen hell. I've been there. Right? Got a t-shirt and brought, like Kip said, I brought a couple demons back to do my bidding. Like, you get your ass out there and get all this other stuff out of my way. Right? And that's like the story of Christ when he cast the devils into the pigs. It's the same principle. Now, whether you believe that physically happened or not is irrelevant. Who cares? It's the principles that matter more than whether or not we can prove these specific things happen. It's the principles that matter. He had dominion over everything. Like, what are you going to say to me? Get your ass up out of here. Who are you talking? You see what I mean? So it's these things that you're so afraid of. When you finally get willing to embrace the greatest depths of your fear, you'll find the greatest dosage of your courage. And Once you get through the fear, you'll find the greatest happiness, man. So don't look at these struggles that have come to y'all's lives as a curse. It is a freaking blessing. It's like I always say, if you read the story of the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve and God, him kicking them out of the garden was grace, mercy, and favor, not punishment the way we've been taught in kind of classical fundamentalist Christianity. Why? Because a bird doesn't learn how to fly if the mom doesn't kick it off the branch. If they had just lived in, unearned prosperity their whole lives, they never would have developed the character that makes them more and more and more. So every struggle, this is the way I want you guys to look at struggle. Every time you're encountering a struggle, that's God saying, okay, as you go through this and you integrate it into who you are, you've become that much more like me. So, there's a scripture too that says God disciplines those he loves, right? Or she, whatever you want to say, right? But the point is, when I tell my son, your dyslexia is not a curse, it's a gift. That's God saying, hey, this is an opportunity to get more like me because you have to overcome something that other people aren't dealing with. That's also him saying, I have more faith in you than I have in some of these other people who don't have these struggles, right? So you have to start looking at even some of those dark places you've been as what's the positive side of this? My friend dying in combat is horrible. And I'm not saying God killed him so I become a stronger person. That's idiotic. What I'm saying is, as a result of his death, I now have the opportunity to take that pain and turn it into something that makes me a stronger person. You see that? So I want you guys to start looking at your struggles as opportunities instead of looking at them like, oh God, what am I going to do with this? Win. That's what you're going to do with this. Got it? Adam says, I know a few with dyslexia. It forces you to readjust and develop. Okay, I read that one already. Sweet. Gretchen says, maybe doing something to do with cultural awareness. Okay, cool. Prejudice. Got it. Is literally worldwide. And it's just lack of exposure. Okay, so there you go. Could you see yourself as a consultant that companies hire to come in and do different types of diversity training? And should you want to get trained as a diversity executive, I can actually hook you up with the guy who's the master of it. He teaches a course like every month, and he's a freaking beast. Actually, he and his business partner, who's a recently retired Green Beret. So, if you'd like to meet those people, send me an email. And I will introduce you as someone who would be interested in taking their course. Now, I don't know where you're from, you might have to do some traveling. But that's just an example, right? If you wanted to educate companies or people on issues that counteract good, healthy diversity, he'd be. And by the way, he's the one that trained me. When I became a certified facilitator, he's the one that did my initial training before I went to the board and got my certificate that's somewhere on my shelf. He's the guy that qualified me to go get certified. And I've done facilitations with him for different companies, right? I've been on stages with him doing public speaking. In fact, he got me my last public speaking gig. He's like, yo, I want you to come speak at this government event downtown in DC. These government employees need some help. I was like, all right, I'll come speak, right? So, yeah. But see, you see how it took you, well, not me. Do you see how you are going on the journey of figuring it out? See, the problem is you guys get overwhelmed with, I don't know, and then you stop there. You don't ask any more questions. Well, what do I like? I asked you 3 questions and you've already gotten closer to the dang dream than just living and I don't know. And it's nothing I'm doing. I'm just showing you the questions you're supposed to ask, which is, what are you interested in teaching? What kind of people you're interested in teaching? I don't know. I'd like to teach people about diversity because that's something that's important to me. Okay, great. There's a huge market for that. You see what I mean? You've got to get in the habit of asking yourself the questions. That's all it is. Dun-dun-dun. Caitlin's in the house. Teaching adults to communicate better. Okay, there you go. That's, by the way, being a certified facilitator, the art and the science of facilitation is literally the business of creating better conversations. That's what facilitators do, is help people communicate to solve problems. That's it. All right. So think about it. Something you could do. Thank you so much for saying this to me and everyone watching. That's what we do here, Nancy. You're awesome. Thanks for being here. Caitlin says, I am working on becoming a physics and writing a book that will help other black girls follow behind me. Been working through a lack of self confidence. Okay, great. So, Caitlin, self confidence comes from competence. Competence comes from continuous action to build skill, right? Knowing what to get competent in comes from self awareness. And that's what we've just spent the last 2.5 hours talking about. So you've got the first of the three things you need for confidence, right? You've got a starting point for self-awareness. You need to build on that, and then you need to use that self-awareness to go out and build competence, right? You think Michael Jordan wasn't confident that he was going to go win? No, but the reason why he was confident is because he stayed in the gym after practice and forced himself to make 1,000 jump shots before he left. It's math. It's I do this so much when I have to do it in a game. I know I can call on this skill. Like if somebody called me up tomorrow, like, "Hey B, I need you to come tomorrow to this place. You're going to speak for 30 minutes on self-awareness." I could do it. I don't even need to rehearse. Just tell me where the stage is because I've done it a billion times. Right now, I would rehearse. I'd probably bring some notes. I'd ask questions about who is the audience I'm speaking to so I know some things I need to pepper in to make it relatable to them. But that confidence isn't like I just believe in myself. It's I've been doing this so long that I know I can do it, right? Confidence is not a thing that people are like, you have so much confidence, and they think I was born with it. Like, no, I was born a chubby, short, insecure coward. Like confidence comes from building. All right, what do we got? GMA co-anchor Robin Roberts. Someone fact checked this. Wait. GMA co-anchor. I'm not sure. What are we fact checking, Nancy? Adam Bell says, I never watched all of Walking Dead, but that scene where she was the samurai, she has the samurai sword and walks in with zombie slaves. It's fucking boss. Yeah, exactly. Nancy says, the lady who said, make your mess. Oh, okay. Robin Roberts. Okay, cool. Cool. Kip says, thanks you, LTD. It's weird to have found a person on a similar path here. I wish you all the very best. Amen to that. Lucas Seifert, I think is how we say that. I just came from TikTok. What up, Lucas? John says, I'd rather die pursuing what I love than to live a life where I'm unhappy, which is a living death. Good on you. Nancy says, how old is your son, if you don't mind? Which one? I have like 14 sons. And they range from preteen to toddler. Lou Manark says, there's that sexy beard. What's up, homeboy? Glad you're still above ground, sailor. Always a pleasure to see you, man. Nancy says Japanese. That's how I live my life, says iFlames. I cooked him dinner with perfect plating as well. Oh, that's funny. Nancy says, so this is strange. I've been oddly chilled during this quarantine, even though I'm unemployed and I'm technically broke. But when I was in a place of stability, I'm a puddle of PTSD. That's not confusion. It's you are now living in something that you feared and had anxiety about before. And now that you're there, you realize it's not as bad as you imagined. That's the magic of embracing your fears. I always tell people study. Don't just watch. Go watch interviews from the top stand-up comedians, and they'll teach you all this stuff. You don't even need a therapist to learn some of it because they're the ones going to therapists. You can just learn what they're learning. But I think it was Dimitri Martin was talking about. He was talking to Kevin Pollak, who's another famous comedian who's before my time. Like I knew who Kevin Pollak was and had seen him in movies, but he's quite a bit older than me, I think. Well, no, I know he's older than me, but I don't know if he's 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is. But anyway, he was saying about getting up on stage and being nervous. And Dimitri's like, well, at this point in my career, I'm not really nervous. He's like, because I've gone through the grind of working on material. And once you bomb, it's great because you get it out of the way and you realize, oh, I think Dave Chappelle said this too. He's like, bombing when you're doing it, you realize, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought. Oh, Louis C.K. teaches it too. It's like you realize when you're bombing on stage that it's not as horrible an experience as you're afraid, like no one laughing or yelling or heckling you. It's like when you're in it, you realize, oh, this isn't as bad as I imagined it was going to be. He's like, and then you could just get to work. You can just keep working on your material, right? So everything you fear is in the future. You don't fear anything that's happening to you right now because you're in it, right? And most of the things you fear in the future never happen. All the hardship you go through hardens you for life. Yep. Gretchen says, I would absolutely be interested. Gretchen, send me an email, contact@bryantchambers.com, right? And I will introduce you to my buddy and let him know that you're interested in taking his course. I don't remember how much it costs. I believe it's a couple $1,000, if I'm not mistaken, but it's really, really intensive. It is like a college course condensed into a number of days, and then there's like distance learning work. It is a freaking monster of a course. In fact, I went through my certification process elsewhere. He wants me to come back and go through his because he just finished building it. It's like, I want you to come back through mine, dude, and take notes and tell me what to fix. And I want to beat the crap out of you for a couple of weeks. I was like, all right, we'll do it. Broken Suba says, you mentioned the test. Actually, never heard of it, so I gave it a go. Don't necessarily agree with the percentages, but high to low, steadiness, compliance, dominance, and influence. How would you rate yourself, Suba? From what I know about you, none of those sound crazy, but you theoretically, and it's not theoretical, you know yourself better than I do. Which one of those do you disagree with in particular? Nancy says Buddhism and Hindu have a similar view of struggle being like an opportunity to, yeah, I don't know any religion that doesn't believe in that. Christianity talks about taking up your cross. It talks about bearing one another's burdens. It talks about brothers born for adversity, right? So yeah, and definitely Buddhism has a very strong, I think, good view of those things. John says, so when would the next live stream lecture gonna be? Because I definitely want to be there, Sensei. I don't know when the next lecture would be. I'm usually doing my podcast at this time, but I wanted to reteach this course for my free and paid courses that this particular class lives in, and so I just hijacked my podcast filming to make it. But I typically on YouTube at the minimum will stream on Saturday or Sunday around 9 p.m. But if you're subscribed and you've got the bell turned on, I always make the stream go on. I always upload the stream. I try to do it a couple hours before I go live to give you get the email ahead of time that says, hey, at 9 o'clock this is going to be happening. And I announce the hell out of it on TikTok. Um, my wife and I are still in flux as she's doing her preparing for law school stuff. So sometimes it's a little bit harder for us to have an exact schedule all the time, especially now that I'm kind of while she's working on that, I have become kind of the stay-at-home dad while she's out, gallivanting. She's not gallivanting. She's working to pursue her dream. But so as a result, my schedule is a little bit less predictable than usual. But I stream on YouTube a couple times a week. Uh, So here's what I can tell you. I don't stream on Mondays because I got other stuff going on, and that's the day. That's one of the days where I'm meeting with my doc. Um, I typically always stream on Saturday or Sunday, and like my wife right now is asleep because she was freaking balling since 3 o'clock this morning. She's like, dude, I'm cooking y'all dinner, going to bed so I can get my stuff done. Like she's doing writing samples and all these things. Uh, so that's how it be. John says, so okay, I already answered that one. Gretchen says, okay. Nancy says the dyslexic one. That's my preteen. and my wife and me. Josh says, I have one question. I've been feeling uneasy of going out in public as I have this sense of feeling I am not welcome, even though I know that is not the case. However, I feel uncomfortable when I am in solitude, be it now when everything is quiet or when I'm out in nature. I come to realize more that I can feel how other people are feeling and it can get overwhelming. Is there a way to deal with this? Well, there's probably a couple ways to deal with it. One, I wouldn't lean on completely believing some of the feelings you get, especially if the feelings you think you're feeling from other people are going through a filter of insecurity that you have about yourself and how much people like you and your self worth. I'd start squaring away your valuing of yourself and building up your self worth for you first, because then you're going to feel much more comfortable out in space. Like if you are really in love with yourself and you're doing esteemable things, you're going to have more self-esteem and thus feel less like you guys ever notice when I'm streaming outside and I talk nicely to people, uh, people are always smiling at me saying hi. It's I smile first, but it's I don't feel like, oh my God, but for years I felt out of place hanging out with civilians because it was just like these people. Except for entrepreneurs, I always jived with entrepreneurs, even if they weren't soldiers, because it's the same. It's the same value system usually. Like the billionaire that first started teaching me the ropes. That dude was an assassin, but he's also a cool cat. He's also on the Forbes 500 list. I'm proud of him, man. He's been working his way up. But the so I'd start there. Secondly, take a friend with you. Don't go alone. In the military, we have a principle: you don't go anywhere alone. You always go with your battle buddy. So start going outside with someone else that you trust and that you like, and get them to help you feel more comfortable in your own skin and in your space. Smiley Jones says, I absolutely appreciate that you put this on YouTube and gave a heads up from TikTok. So much great advice and ideas to better myself. Thank you, King. And all the people ask, yeah, bless you, Smiley. I appreciate you being here. Really, thanks, man. Much love, and thanks for the compliments. Nancy says, do you really have 14 biological sons? No, I do not. Me and Nick joke about having a lot of kids because we have more. He has more. He has about double the kids I have. Uh, but we joke about it because we have more kids than the average person. All right, so it just becomes, like I remember having the first kid, it's like, this is awesome. And then the second kid was like, oops. And the third kid was like, you gotta be kidding me. The next kid was like, of course you're pregnant. Whatever. Get in there. Like, I don't even need to be at the birth. Just, send the baby home in a basket. It's whatever. Moses. You know what I mean? So when you have a lot of kids, you just start joking about how they destroy the essence of what you used to be. But then they turn you into a new person that you like a lot better too. It's awesome. I meant to say comfortable in solitude. Okay, well, so let's assume that you have very little extroverted energy. I haven't looked at your uh, hexacode test, but I imagine you score pretty low in extroversion. And I think solitude isn't always a bad thing, man. I mean, we all need other humans to be connected with, but someone who's very low in extroversion may need a little bit less. When I go to camp in Wisconsin every year, I isolate because I spend my whole like I'm an extrovert and I'm pretty extroverted, but that's the only place I go all year where my kids are at the playground or doing their events with the camp counselors. Uh, my wife is usually out doing something with them or somewhere else doing cool stuff. Or my wife and I sleep in different cabins usually. I'm with the kids and then uh, she sleeps with our friends and the baby, and then I have the other three kids because there's no cabin that fits everybody, right? So she'll have the youngest, and I'll have the next three guys, and then but I just sit in my cabin when the kids are all playing, and I'll just read books and play. I bring like a handheld game with me that I'm working on. I'll read books and play that. And my mom always be like, "Come on, you're supposed to be hanging out." Like, I'm like, "No." And I remember telling my therapist last year when we went, I was like, my mom kept checking on me. I think she thought I was having like a PTSD episode. She's like, "That ain't PTSD. That's you live in a house with seven people, and you've outgrown the house, and you're working with all the stuff that's going on." to get your new home, which is coming soon. But it's like you're still in a house with 7 people. Of course, you are isolating. Like, well, that's healthy. Keep reading books. Tell your mom to leave you alone. So. But when you do want to connect with other humans, take a friend with you who can help you with that connection. John says, awesome, definitely subscribed. And honestly, I don't use notifications for YouTube, but for you, I will because I value what you do. Yeah, man, I appreciate that. And that's how notifications are supposed to be used, right? I'm the same. I don't hit the bell for anybody except cats that I want to hear from. Like, I want to know every time so and so drops a new post. Right? I want to get an email because this person is so valuable to me, what they have to say. And I think that's how people should use the bell. It's like I watch these channels that are just kind of mindless and hit the bell. Like nobody wants to get the email from you, bro. 70,000 other channels doing this same thing. That's no disrespect, but I totally respect where you're coming from, man. And I appreciate that. I'm honored that you feel that way. Caitlin says, I also took the disc test. Your main was 49 dominance, 33 influence, 13 steadiness, and 0 compliance. Okay, cool. Broken Suba says, I make an active effort to communicate as effectively as possible. I have the skills. It's just not as important to me as the others. Maybe that's the point, but I think I'd make it at least 10 to 15. So which one are you challenging? Let me go back up to your scores. Steadiness, compliance, dominance. So are you thinking influence? So are you saying influence would be higher? And so read the sheet that describes influence in detail, what they mean by it, right? Because it's not. I think it's. I don't believe the test is trying to tell you that you lack the ability to influence. It's just as you said, you don't value it very high. You only value it when you need it. Caitlin says had been studying psychology, then in August changed to physics. Uh, that was a risk, but not looking back. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Oh, bless you, man. I wish I could claim it as my wisdom. It's wisdom from people like this guy. Yeah, none of it's mine. Adam Bell says, haha, I'm in Wisconsin now. I didn't think I'd like it. It's beautiful, man. I can only go in the summer because I'm not going to live around 10 feet of snow or temperatures that drop below 0. But it's a beautiful place in July. And I don't think we'll get to go this year, sadly. I think it's probably going to get shut down because of Corona time. But, it's whatever. And it's a camp where you're in close proximity to a lot of other humans. So like if somebody came there with it, everybody would have it. There is no social distancing in that place. Uh, Josh says, well, was with my sister when we went to get your copy of Animal Crossing New Horizons game, as well as a green tea frappuccino, which is delicious, by the way. Uh, So that helps a bit. I just feel sad with the atmosphere lately. Well, I mean, the atmosphere is sad. Of course, you feel a little bit sad, man. That's normal. Okay, so Adam Bell just took the disc test too. Cool. Nancy says, you would have jived with some chefs. Not all there are a lot of sociopaths, uh, but a lot of solid peeps. Yeah, it's my wife is a chef, right? And she owned her own bakery for a while, and then like now she's moonlighting at she started moonlighting at Whole Foods because she wanted to get some of the culinary skills that they use. She's like, I'll just learn how to do their method while they pay me for it. I was like, that's a pretty brilliant lady. But she had to shut her bakery down when we had our last kid because it's just too much time dedicated to the kids for me to have been running a business, and her trying to run one, and it just became too much to manage. But yeah, my wife is a freaking dynamite chef. I just don't like to cook. That's where I run into problems. I'm okay at it. Like I cook things that taste good and have good texture. I just don't like when I hear people say I cook because it gives me peace. It's like building IKEA furniture to me. It's tedious. Broken Super says, gotcha, that makes sense. The site I went to must have the details locked behind a paywall, so I'll look it up. Yeah, just give it a look, man, because I don't think it's negatively saying you lack the ability to influence. You probably just only value the ability to influence when it's necessary, which means you're probably more influential than you realize, because you're not actively trying to do it. You're just influencing through action. Glad to know it's accurate, though. Thanks. Yeah. And, take everything with a grain of salt. None of these tests, or zero of these tests I'm giving you are perfect. They're just going to give you a glimpse. Kitchens have some interesting personalities for damn sure. I believe it. Josh says the green tea frappuccino. It is delicious, man. My wife got me one. I was like, what is in the name of Jesus is this? It's like, it's a green tea frappuccino. I was like, what does frappuccino mean? It's frozen cappuccino. Oh, is that for real a word, or did weird hippie white people that drink Starbucks make that up? What are we talking about? It's like, what? Why are you being racist? I'm not being racist. I'm white too, kind of. I just asked. I know a black person didn't come up with frappuccino. Like, come on. Sorry. Sidebar. I go into these schizophrenic episodes with my alter ego just off camera, so you guys are going to have to put up with it. Nancy says Wisconsin has its majesty beauty, as does Minnesota. I've never been to Minnesota. I've heard it's pretty cool. One of the ladies I coach, who is also a coach, is from Minnesota. Adam says, I cook because other people suck ass at it. Well, there is that. And I ain't getting none of New Orleans in this Yankee ass place unless I make it myself. Kip says, oh, wow, I found something we disagree on. I cooked for 8 tonight, and cooking makes me less stabby. Oh man, cooking. So I will say, as I've gotten older, because I cook a lot more for myself now that my wife has been on this, law school, steal all of Whole Foods recipes kick, where she spends a lot more time outside of the house. Um, and I'm more, Mr. Mom at home. I don't hate it as much as I used to. Like I had to cook last night just for me. Like the kids were fine. I think we made them chicken nuggets or something. But I made shirataki noodles with chicken sausage and Brussels sprouts, right? And I made this I have this little Asian seasoning concoction that I make that's pretty tasty. And it was delicious and I enjoyed it. Uh, I don't hate it as much as I used to. I think it's just because I'm getting old and I'm getting probably the patience that comes with being older. But it's still not like cooking is something my wife enjoys. Like she gets a level of joy out of cooking. I've never had that. It's like people that talk about getting runner's high. I've run a lot of miles, never got high off of it. And they tell me, oh, you didn't run far enough. Well, then I'm never getting high from running because I ran really far, further than I ever wanted to, and I'm not ever running that far again. Like, even if a bear is chasing me at 2 miles an hour, I'm just going to fight the bear. And if I lose, well, then the bear deserved to win. I'm not running 19 miles at 3 miles an hour to get away from a bear. It's not going to happen. Uh, but yeah, like I never had runner's high. Never got the zen from cooking that people get. Um, but I don't hate it as much now. Like I hated cooking when I was younger, but that's because Taco Bell existed and it was easy. He said makes me less stabby. I like that. I'm stealing that one. I also like the caramel one too. I think there are a few others I like, but cannot remember at the moment. I can dig that. Adam Powell says, laughing my ass off at Kip. Broken Zuba says, if Corona ever goes away, I'll be working in a kitchen. I love the idea. Now, I tell you who I would love to cook with is Gordon Ramsay. I just cause the realness that comes out of that dude's mouth, like how would you not be entertained? Like he would hate me as a sous chef because I'd always be laughing. Like, what the fuck are you laughing at, you blockbuster? Like I can't do his accent. I'm sorry. Everything you do is hilarious. I'm not scared of people who yell, and I'm not insecure to where you're gonna hurt my feelings, bro. Like this is funny. Like I've watched videos on repeat of you screaming in people's mouths. Like it's hilarious. But I would love to work in his kitchen just to see people get, you know, the verbal assaults he launches at people are comedy, man. Oh man, he was. I actually tried to do when I was playing around with different YouTube content. I did a I did a try not to laugh, and I had people send in videos you think will make me laugh because nothing makes me laugh. I have such a dark sense of humor that most kind of pedestrian humor is not funny to me. And somebody sent me a Gordon Ramsay, the Fooking Bass is Fooking Raw, and it's to dubstep music, and it caught me. I was like, oh, that one's hard not to laugh at, because they make him in slow motion when it starts dubstepping. Uh, but yeah, I would love to work with Gordon Ramsay and just see him go nuts. But he would always scream at me because I know I'd mess stuff up. But he'd throw me out of the kitchen. He's like, "Stop laughing." I was like, "I can't stop laughing. You're hilarious. Like nobody should behave like you, ever. Nobody should be this angry over anything. You're just hilarious, man." Oh man, it's because Kip stabs the meat. Might be. Kip says, I have two fridges, two freezers, two deep freezers. I can feed my tribe for 6 months, no shopping. Yeah, we've got two fridges and two freeze and one deep freezer. Yeah, we've got two refrigerators and a deep freezer. So we're a little bit behind you. But when my wife was running the bakery, she had to have all that stuff. That was another thing too. Having another kid took up more space. So, when you run the bakery out of your home, there's all these sanitary standards you have to meet. And I was like, once we had the last kid, it was like, come on, this is this this business is on hold until these kids get out of the house. Then you can start making cakes again. Kip says, I have. Oh no, I read that one already. Nancy says, cooking for hundreds can be my zen. It hasn't been in a while. Okay, that's okay. Maybe I need to change a career. Maybe unemployment in my golden is my golden ticket. Sous chef work roughly 50, 60 hours a week. That's a lot. One of the things I would be okay working as like a sous chef is you're on your feet, you're active, and you're dealing with people. And I'm better at that than like I couldn't sit at a desk for for a career. Ugh. No, thank you. Since I switched to healthy eating a few weeks ago, it feels extremely rewarding knowing that my efforts are much more productive. That's awesome, man. Good on you. Keep it up. Nancy says school has always seemed too time consuming or out of my monetary placement. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you have to, like my wife, I hate school. Like you couldn't pay me to go back and get another degree. I barely got out of college the first time because I was bored out of my effing mind. And you got to remember, I was a kid that grew up thinking I was dumb because I didn't do well in school, and that's kind of how it went. And my parents always kind of reassured me, like, you're not as dumb as your grades. You just aren't great at school. And I wasn't horrible. I wasn't like Gary V, like bragging about getting F's and everything. I was like, well, I'm not that bad. But, I was a C student at best, and I was just bored all the time. Um, so people have to understand, like, if school is an environment where you can thrive, I can't. Because if I'm not interested, I'm just not going to be checked in. My wife, though, like, she's wanted to be an attorney her whole life. Uh, and when the kids came, they kind of put that on hold. So she's got the full court press on making this thing happen, which is great. She's got my support. We're even talking about if she had gotten into school in Georgia, we were probably going to move down there, but she didn't. And now that she thinks more about it, she's like, I'm kind of glad that didn't go through because I want to stay where we are and just move further out so you can get onto land that's away from humans so that you don't like. Kip calls it being stabby. I call it being choky, so that you don't choke the hell out of people in the streets. Which I've racked up 0 chokes since 2004 is the last time I put my hands on a dude. But he deserved it. It wasn't like, I mean, certainly I'm sure PTSD had something to do with it, but he tried to put his hands on my wife, and that ended very poorly for him that evening. But I have not picked up anybody else by their freaking shirt to choke them since that day. So, I'm doing all right. Let's see. You talked about purpose. Wait, hold on. What? That's awesome. She's a smart lady for getting paid. Yeah. She was like, I'm not, she hasn't been to culinary school. She's like, I need to learn these cake techniques. I'll just go get a part time gig at Whole Foods. They'll teach me how to do all that crap and I'll make extra money for whatever. It's like, all right. And she's like, I'll get away from these kids. Like, all right, get in there. You know, for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, I'm at home, so it's like, yeah, go do your thing, man. Go have fun. Yeah, she's a pretty smart lady, dude. Let's see. Broken Super says, haha, you and Gordon, that would be a show. Dude, I would be, I, I would love to be on a show with Gordon Ramsay because the character I would play is the guy that antagonizes him to attack everybody else. It would just be me. Like, Gordon, I don't know if I'd take that, bro. You should have heard what he said about your mom. What did he say about my mom? I don't know. I think it was disrespectful what he did. You should probably go in there and deal with it. And then I just follow in when he goes in throwing food at people. Because he's hilarious, man. I don't know how anybody cries when they get yelled at. Like, how are you not laughing when this man is screaming in your face? Like, he's not scary. He's not an imposing human. I mean, I can imagine if Andre the Giant walked in my room and had his hands around my throat and was screaming at me, I'd probably be a little scared. But Gordon Ramsay, like, what are you crying for? This is awesome. Y'all clearly never been in the army. Hey, I would pay Gordon Ramsay $1 million an episode to be like a temporary drill sergeant. Like we teach him how to be a drill sergeant in the military. Just lit. Because none of the soldiers would be scared of him. That's what would make it funny is they'd all just be laughing at Gordon Ramsay, screaming at him in a drill sergeant uniform. I gotta stop giving these ideas away. That's a $1 billion enterprise right there that I just came up with. You talked about purpose, but what if that is still unclear after a decade plus of trying to answer all your questions about who I am, my values, curiosity, 10 years? So, when Adam, what you're dealing with there, I would say, is probably a little bit. You correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you as well as I know you from the comments here and hanging out online. But that sounds a little bit more like paralysis by overanalysis than it does you not know. And certainly, there's a lot of nuance to this, so let me unpack it. You're going to spend your whole life getting more clarity. So expecting that you're going to understand everything about exactly how your vision is supposed to work, like that's not going to happen. Like you're never going to get the tablets with the 10 commandments on them from Jesus like Moses did, right? That's probably not going to happen. What you're going to get is pieces of the puzzle. So for example, when I talk about the farm, that was never in my plan ever. Like the work I was doing with veterans was going to be much more seminars, going around to different military posts and helping these guys, doing a lot of one-on-one coaching, which I have done and do, but that was the vision. I didn't get the idea for the farm until I went to Joel Salatin's farm. And if you guys don't know who Joel Salatin is, I've never seen the movie, but I know he is the good guy in Food Inc. Like he is the protagonist in that movie. Uh, and he's one of those human beings where when you get around him, you become a better human being. He's awesome. I recommend going to his farm and meeting him if you ever can. Because it was a huge. So when I went to his farm and the serenity and seeing him do the work, like I'm not a farmer. I have no desire to herd cattle or any of that. I will outsource that part of my farm. I wanted it for the land and the serenity and the things that I can build on the property, obstacle courses, weapons ranges, training and living quarters for people that I plan to train and help not just make a transition from like military life to civilian life or athletes or whoever shows up, but to actually train people into how to command their own and command, not just have a handle on their life, command it by putting them through hardship and forcing them to and not forcing, but putting them in a situation where they have to overcome hardship by working together with other people and learning that they can go further than they thought they could. The idea of having a facility never crossed my mind until I went to Joel Salatin's farm. I was like, wait a minute. I could do this in a different way, blah, blah, blah. Right. So you're going to get pieces of this vision as you keep going. Right. So I would submit to you that uh, it's probably not unclear. It's just not a complete picture. And if you're the type of personality that likes to cross your T's and dot your I's and have everything figured out, what I'll tell you is be encouraged. You're probably never going to have exactly what that looks like. My mentor, I was actually talking to my mentor today, and my catchphrase with him, but it's true, is that he has been a successful, wealthy businessman longer than I've been on earth, right? And so he teaches me a lot of things. I hit him up today. I was like, hey man, do you need any help with anything? What are you doing in business right now, with inventions or whatever, because he's an inventor and owns patents and all that stuff. I was like, what are you working on right now that I can help you with? And I said, let me give you the ulterior motive up front. I want to work with you just because I want to be around you, and I learn stuff when I'm around you. He's already given me what I need to do for a product that I want to launch in a couple of years that's not tied to any of the stuff we talk about here, right? But I need some other pieces in place and some other things that I'm prioritizing before I give any of my attention to that project, because that's more like a fun project. But he taught me he taught me about a business mistake he made 40 years ago. Like, he's like, we did tried to do the same thing, we butchered it because of this. I'm like, okay, got it. you know he's like, as long as you cannot do that, you'll be fine. He's still figuring out what he's doing with his business and upsizing or downsizing it. He's doing real estate investment. He's enjoying himself, right? And he's the type of person who's never going to retire. But some of it's always going to be unclear. I haven't talked to any of the people in my sphere that have exactly everything they're trying to do figured out to the point where they could write it on a sheet of paper where it's step one, do this, step two. So there's going to be some ambiguity to what you're doing. What I want you to be careful of is not taking action because you don't have an exact plan, right? Write out what you're thinking and then begin to execute on that plan, and then just adjust as you keep going, right? So my whole and I that the whole setup of me saying all that is stop trying to find the answers and go make the answers. You have enough of the puzzle to build the plan and begin to execute, and then let the pieces fall into place and make the necessary adjustments on the field. Right? It's like Colin Powell said, 40% of the plan is enough to go to war with. We'll figure out the rest on the ground. Right? And that's the way you got to play the game. Because if you wait until you have 100% of the plan, the war's over because the other team won. Nancy says, okay, she's talking to Broken Suba. Gretchen says, so I took the dark triad. First, narcissism. Machiavellianism 1. Okay, it's narcissism 14, Machiavellianism 1, psychopathy 9. Am I evil now? Yes, but so are we. All right, so I would say Machiavellianism, fine, that's within normal limits. I would definitely talk with your therapist about the psychopathy one. That one gives me some concern. Right, like if you were a Navy SEAL and scored a 9, I'd be like, okay, it's fine. But actually, before I say that, 14, 1, and 9 out of what? Because depending on where you took the dark triad test, the scores and the scopes are different. So 14 out of what, 1 out of what, and 9 out of what before I give you this advice. Adam Bell says, Ramsey, where's the fucking sauce? Exactly. Right, you should deal with your disrespect as a reflection of your insecurity. What was that? I should deal with my disrespect as a reflection of your insecurity. Adam, flesh that out. I don't understand what you're talking. That's without context. That's a very random statement. You should deal with your disrespect. With what disrespect? iFlame says I'd pay to watch that. Damn, I agree. But more about it is recognizing my experience and potential and being frustrated with the limits of my potential by my career environment. My opportunity is held back by my talent and skill. Okay, so if it's a skill deficiency, that's something that's fixable though, right? I feel that. I don't need an exact plan. I'm an executor. Okay, good. And a begrudging leader. Okay, good. It's good that you know that about yourself. But I am unsatisfied with my path, and I feel like everything and everyone is holding me back from doing anything worthwhile. So now you know that part's not true. That's expressing a feeling. The reality is our tendency is to blame the circumstances for our lack of action, but really what you've got to do in that moment is take responsibility for your inaction and get after it, right? Especially like if you're a begrudging leader, that probably means you're begrudging and leading yourself too. So you're gonna have to kick yourself in the ass a little bit, or get a battle buddy who can kick you in the ass and get you moving. Um, right. So if you're unsatisfied with your path, I would spend some time writing all the things specifically that you're unsatisfied with, because those are signals to let you know these are things I shouldn't be doing, right? Like when people ask me if I ever want to run for office, and I'd say I'd rather be lit on fire, it's because I know myself very well, right? I wouldn't want to work with those people. I wouldn't want to have to compromise my values for votes, which I would have to do, because if I was completely honest on a platform, they'd throw me out of the discussion, right? Or start planning my assassination if I managed to win anything. Are you able to talk about your military life if it's not a sensitive topic? No, I'm happy to talk. I talk about it all the time. Not now, just some funny things on TikTok, maybe. Sure. Yeah, anything you want to know. Adam Bell says, yeah, but dude, I am totally ready to pull the trigger on my plans to dominate my surroundings. But Jesus, man, I don't have the career cred to back up my plans to overthrow the illegit people in my lab. Okay, so obviously I don't know the specifics of what you're talking about, but there's some limiting beliefs in here where uh, you don't have the career cred. Who is the judge of this cred, and why do you need that for what you're trying to do? Right? Without a little bit more context, it would be hard for me to advise you on that. Nancy says, I personally would be afraid of Gordon Ramsay because I'm 5'2" female. Maybe I'm devalued my physical strength, but big dudes scare me when they. Yeah, well, that makes sense, right? Because he could be a physical threat to you. That makes a ton of sense. I just people who scream like him, to me, they're just funny. Like I don't find people like that intimidating. They're just hilarious to me. It's like I wouldn't be able to stop. Maybe it's my military background where I've been. The screaming is a part of the training you go through. You just deal with it and keep it moving. Kip says dark triad results. Uh, N twice. I think spell check got you. Oh, twice as narcissistic and Machiavellian, not very psycho. That's cool, right? I don't think many entrepreneurs and soldiers get away from the narcissism piece. It's part of the game. Machiavellian, probably, if you're a little bit higher Machiavellianism, you're also probably a very good salesman, because you got to be able to, in a good or bad way, manipulate other people, which is what Machiavellianism is. It's the ability to manipulate others or influence others, depending on how you want to look at it. Like if you were off the charts Machiavellian, then it's like, okay, uh, you'd want to look at, are you manipulating people for their good or at their expense? And then as long as it's the former, not the latter, you'd be all right. Hey, so I just took my disc test. This is my score. Steadiness 34, dominance 32, compliance 18, and influence 16. Cool. Matika Mystique says, I attended a school that was all about academics only. It was against school rules to have books other than the assigned school textbooks. That's torture for me. Love your videos, watching from Trinidad. Hey, Trinidad. Gretchen says, okay, so okay. Now, thank you, Gretchen, because your psychopathy score scared me. You were you were you were writing out the percentiles, not the scores. Okay, you're fine. Psychopathy scared me to death. I'm like 9 out of what? Like, because that means you've killed people. But no, that's fine. That's totally within normal limits. I would just be aware that psychopathy is not zero, which means, your ability to feel remorse over doing something negative, depending on the context, is going to be a little bit more impaired than someone who scores a zero. Adam says, I work in healthcare. You know how the hierarchy overshadows everything. You're military. Terrible leaders get in the way of progress. Subverting them is just, I'm not that confident in my. Yeah, okay, so you're kind of in a bureaucratic system where it's hard to make moves. Um, then the next question is, if you can't do what you want to do in that field, is it possible for you to take your skills into another field or into some type of freelance environment where you can have more control over your environment? Kip says, straight up, Brian, all this stuff is new to me. Cool to actually take some tests. Yeah, man, it's the like the big five's been around a long time, and then it became Hexaco. Uh, I just learned about Dark Triad a couple years ago, and I started using it on people that I knew in real life just to see, is this crazy? But then, like I tested, for example, I tested a very, very, very vocal, what the internet would call social justice warrior who's offended by everything and screams about everything and blah, blah, blah. And when I got their scores, they didn't know what any of it meant. And they were like, how am I doing? I'm like, woo, Hitler. You're doing pretty good in there. I lied. I had to be a coward and not tell them they were as crazy as they were, because it's like, dang, I don't want to crush this person's soul because they mean well. They have a lot of resentment built on the inside that they are turning that resentment into trying to fight for other people, but not in a healthy way. It was just like, you might want to work on Machiavellianism a little bit because it's scary. Um, but like I said, people can be equally as genuine and loving as they can be vile. So it's pretty crazy. Disc I've known about for a long time. I took my first disc test. I think I was 18 or 19. That one's been around a while. But yeah, it's just so I think it's always good to find something that can give us a little bit more insight into us. Just nothing. It's none of it's perfect, but it's not too terrible. So Adam Bell says exactly. Yeah, he says, no research is. Yeah, dude. If I'm in your shoes, how do you take your knowledge and your skills and apply it to a different industry where you can actually have some authority? That's the question that I would be submitting to the computer that is my subconscious brain in order it to go find me answers. Because I think that unless you want to become Patch Adams, the movie with Robin Williams, and buck the system and deal with all the hell that comes. And here's what I learned about giant bureaucracies, especially when I've seen young people go through bureaucracies. I'm going to change it. You're not going to change it. Like that's a very narcissistic ideology. It's a very narcissistic. It's cute and it's noble that you think you're going to change this organization of 15,000 people who love sexism and and the good old boy system. You're going to be the one to change it. Here's what I could tell you: whatever you're going to change it into isn't going to be better than what it is now because it has broken. It's like when the foundations of the house are broken. I don't care what you build on top of it. That house is going to crumble. And so when you're in a bureaucratic environment, sometimes the only solution is to get the hell out, because you're gonna have a strong uphill. Because like I said, a lot of my business career was going into organizations and helping them un-F themselves. I've been in organizations that were like the organizational equivalent of a crack addict. They wouldn't admit that they had a problem. They would yell at you when you came up with solutions to try to help them fix their business, to include unethical and illegal things they were doing that were going to get them in trouble, and they would still want to fight over it. And it's like, all right, I can't help y'all if you are this delusional about how bad your organization is. So give me my money and I'm leaving, because I'm not going to waste any more time trying to un-F an organization that is like a pig wallowing in its own, slop. You're enjoying sucking too much for me to help you, right? So it's either finding a new industry or finding a corner of the industry you're in that will allow you to have some freedom to move around and do cool stuff. right? And that may mean you need to take your skills and go find a. I have a couple of friends who have startups. Like I have a former military. He was an infantryman and he became a doctor in the military as an officer, and then now he's building a company that's they're building systems to be able to predict the likelihood of someone developing PTSD on the battlefield so they can treat it, they can begin treating it ahead of time, like preparing them for the traumatic experiences in ways that won't allow them to come home with crippling PTSD, right? And won't allow them to be, start abusing substances to try to go to sleep at night. That's the story of a lot of people I know. They won't be suicidal, right? Like you may need to go to a startup that has a little bit more freedom and they're a little bit more wild, wild west so that you can be free to come up with cool ideas and not try to fight a machine. It's like fighting the Matrix. You're not going to win that fight. Matt Montgomery says, have you ever had to cut someone out of your life because you suspected they may be a violent criminal? I don't think so. Um, I've cut people out of my life that were criminals, but not violent. Not like hurting people type stuff. Adam Bell says, trying to change the system from inside eventually corrupts you, but that's what you get when you put a corporation above you. That's a good point. Relating to dark triad traits. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever had to cut off someone because they were violent. But, one, I grew up in a military family. And I was taught at a very young age, like the stuff I hear people teach at entrepreneur seminars, uh, where they say the closest five friends or the sum of your closest five friends is who you are. Like I knew that by the time I was 6. Like I didn't need an entrepreneur seminar to tell me not to hang around crappy people, right? So, you know, yeah, I've had my point is I've had to cut off very few people because I can sense who the shady, dirty guys are. They have a look and a behavior and a demeanor to them. So I never let anybody like that get close to me in the first place, right? I just don't. And that's a lot easier than having to fire them after the fact. Bureaucracies can only be changed with a kind word and a D9 caterpillar. Exactly, man. You can't. It's like Google's going through that right now. Google has basically become the private sector version of a government bureaucracy. They're inefficient. They're horrible at iteration now when they used to be the masters of it. It's because they've gotten too big. And any company that's going to get that big, it's like Warren Buffett says, build your business so that morons can run it because one day they will. And that's not an attack or an indictment on the intelligence of your employees. It's that when you get a lot of humans together and you try to execute things using group dynamics and, freaking let's go around the circle and get what everybody thinks. That never, like, you will never be on the battlefield with a battlefield commander going around the circle and taking a vote about what we should do in a fight, right? We've known what works in fights ever since Sun Tzu, right? And then we've just added to it and adjusted it and made it better for the last however many hundreds of years, right? So you're never going to get a battlefield commander doing groupthink. Like, what do you guys think we should do in this battle? I don't know. Let's go crazy. And then, the one idiot's like, we should have fun. Like, no, you don't get anything done that way. And Google has become like that. And what I'm saying is when you try to operate using committee, either you're the commander or you're not. And that's one of the hardest things if you ever go into consulting work is if you're working with an organization that does everything by committee, that is the worst client you can possibly have because no one's ever going to make a decision. They're just going to keep having idea brainstorming sessions forever and ever and ever, and no one's ever going to execute, especially not the person in charge, because they don't want to make the wrong decision and then be blacklisted and not promoted into the executive suite, right? That's what bureaucracies do. That's why so much of your tax dollars get wasted every year is because it's a giant. That's why it's just hilarious to me that people want they want the government to manage universal health care. Like, I don't think anybody disagrees with universal health care might be a good idea, but letting the government run it, guaranteed you are going to be disappointed with those results. Like you're going to save money with the service you're going to get. Like you're literally going to go into a doctor's appointment and the reception, the lady or the dude taking you in is gonna be like, I'm on my lunch break. I ain't got no time. You're going to have to sit down and wait because I'm eating my lunch. That will happen. If, the people who are screaming about the government taking over everything and socialism, just get ready. That's coming, right? I'm on my lunch break. I ain't got time right now. You go sit down and wait till I finish my lunch. And I'm watching, I guess Jerry Springer doesn't come on anymore. I'm showing my age. But, you don't want any parts of that bureaucratic nightmare of a place, man. You just got to run for the hills. And, Kip is right. once once an organization gets that big, it's countdown to when they are going to get disrupted by a smaller, hungrier company. And Google's already going through that. Snapchat, Instagram and Snapchat took a huge bite out of YouTube's ass. And TikTok is coming right up behind them with another bunch of punches. And YouTube is now like, what the hell do we do? Right? And that's why all their creators, who I told back in 2014, which nobody was listening, I feel like I'm Noah from the Bible. I've been screaming back in 2015, sorry, when I was screaming about this stuff's coming, guys, you better have your act together. You better start planning ahead. If all your money in your little personal brand is coming from AdSense, you are dead. It's over. And I wasn't saying it nice like a lot of the gurus and you should diversify. No, flood's coming. You might want to get on this boat and learn how to make actual money from the stuff you're producing. Start making products. I don't know how to make products. Maybe I'll make some t-shirts. Stop it. You're not selling t-shirts. Like you got to figure out how to make real money off of what you're doing. And if your AdSense is how you're paying your bills, be prepared to be broke in a couple of years. Because even Google was saying that. You know what I mean? It's bureaucracies, man. They'll always get disrupted by companies that are hungrier and faster, right? Because it's so funny, and make no mistake, like YouTube completely disrupted television, but as soon as that happens, almost every corporation does this, and this is why I'm more of an advocate of smaller businesses, because once they become the big dog, they start adopting the behaviors of the industry they just destroyed. And then they become disruptible. But the problem is with, what's his name? Was it Moore's Law? With that in effect, the disruption is going to come faster and faster and faster because the technology is always going to be on the upswing and moving faster. Like I have a book on my shelf right now. It's right here called Three Blind Mice. It's how the television networks got destroyed, right? And YouTube's doing the same thing, right? Favoring celebrity and status and clout over the people. They're basically eating their young. They're cannibalizing their children, which is the creators that built their platform, to get the Conans and all these other people to play there, and to get the Procters and Gambles to advertise there. And I don't think that's sustainable. That's why you see they're selling movies and TV shows now. I started talking about that years ago too. I said, just wait. They're going to start Netflixing it up. And then they're going to use these creators that built their platform as cannon fodder to just attract people to the platform and then keep them there to buy something. And then the only content you're going to make that ever gets promoted is something that helps them sell a product. It's not hard to figure those things out, man. And that's because they became a bureaucracy. Back in 2000, I think it was 14 or 15, when I was meeting with the Google partners, get to go to meetings, right? You get invited. And I was talking to the engineers about, listen, you're telling me that, and I said, this isn't an algorithm question. So understand, I'm using the algorithm in this question to make a point. You're telling me that your system values collective watch time, or what they call watch session time, as the most valuable variable to determine whether or not something gets popular. I just shot, because I think I was there in January, was when my meeting was, but in October I shot a Halloween special that was 6 hours long and nobody left the show. We ended at like 2 a.m. I think, something along those lines, right? And it was straight up engagement the whole time. Nobody left the platform. You mean to tell me that watch session time which by the way did nothing to help my channel. And their only answer was, oh, we'll just turn that 6 hour video into a bunch of funny montages. I said, isn't that counterintuitive to what you want, which is length of session and engagement? I gave you both in spades, and I'm not asking you to give me a handout. I'm just asking you to recognize that if you are good at what you do, you're telling me you want people to stay on this platform. I keep mofos on this effing platform every time I open my mouth. Why, for your sake, not mine, and for the sake of the viewer, why don't you have a system that recognizes that? So that someone who wants to host a 6 hour show, that 300 people are willing to come sit their happy asses and listen to this guy talk for that long, why is there not a system that helps it find lookalike audiences who want to be there for those shows? And their argument, and it was valid, was, well, after the fact, no one wants to watch your show. I said, exactly. Why didn't you find lookalike audiences and drive them to my live show while I was talking? Because that is more you can now go to your Procter and Gamble meeting and say, listen, we've got a handful of these freaking gurus that can come on here and talk for hours at a time and nobody leaves, right? But if you didn't have the gravitas or the pull of like a PewDiePie when he streams, there's probably 40,000 people on that stream. So it was just like, we're giving you what you're asking us for, which is keeping people on the platform. Don't you see that what's going to keep people on this platform is relationships? You think Conan O'Brien, and I love Conan O'Brien's, going to come do a 6 hour live stream and talk to everybody in his stream? If you want to keep people on the platform, you got to engage them, right? And it's like, well, I can just watch the clip of Conan when this is over. I don't need to be here live if I'm not going to actually get to interact with him. So, my whole point there is bureaucracy makes people move slow. And I wouldn't stick around if I was you. Preparation for PTSD is something I could definitely screen for. Even Hexaco can't predict. Yeah, Hexaco is certainly not going to predict that. Hexaco is more measuring your genetic predisposition to things like honesty, conscientiousness, right? It's basically showing you your genetic preference for things. Now, I will say one of the things that since you're in the healthcare, I'd love to see you study because I can't prove this, but if you looked at how people score in altruism and then correlate that to ending up with PTSD after trauma, I'd be willing to bet some money that there's a high correlation with people like me who have a 5 out of 5 in altruism and then going through trauma, because there's something to be said for a person who grows up sheltered like I did in a military environment. Going through trauma when you have a very specific way you think the world works and then that world comes crumbling down around you. That is a recipe for PTSD. So I think the Hexaco, the altruism measurement certainly isn't going to predict PTSD with any regularity without some extensive testing. But I wonder if there's a correlation between altruism and the potential for PTSD. But no, my buddy's measuring it at studying, people's genes, like isolating the genes that predispose somebody to it. Even more than that, I want to get bad actors out. Yeah, well, good luck with that. It's too much money to be made by keeping people sick. All right, narcissism, Machiavellianism. And so if you guys are wondering what all these terms mean, narcissism means self-value. And if it's too high, you value yourself too much and at the expense of others. Machiavellianism is manipulativeness. Usually if you're really high in Machiavellianism, I can, with very small margin of error, predict that you've had some type of abuse in your life, because being manipulative is usually a survival behavior that you learn to manipulate your abuser. Right? And then psychopathy is just your inability to feel remorse for doing wrong stuff. Jack Martin says, I read that one already. Adam says, no, Bryant, you got to take that a step further and wreck them from hurting others. The dark tetrad types are well enough to push aside, but they're going to destroy others. They need to be put in place. Okay, that's fair. Okay, I guess I got to work on my scumbag detector. Oh, 100%. Yeah, I just had a built-in scumbag protector. That was my dad. So my dad grew up in a pretty rough place, so he taught me how to sniff that stuff out. Nancy E says Matt Montgomery. Okay, I guess I got to work on. Okay, good time to quarantine. Adam Bell says, no, you don't distance yourself from an enemy. You lure their ass and get them to fall on their own sword. I guess Adam Bell didn't score zero on Machiavellianism. Gretchen says, I'm thinking about making an appointment with a counselor or therapist. Yeah. Well, do it anyway, right? Because even if there's nothing inherently wrong with you, then doing preventive maintenance is a good idea. Let's see. Nancy and Matt are chatting. Adam says, damn, that is truth and exposes the fault in their algorithm. Yeah, well, and there's nuance to it, right? Like, I'm sure if PewDiePie did a live stream for 6 hours, he wouldn't have that problem. He's fine. You know, I mean, he's going to get all the eyeballs he wants because he's done a good job of driving attention through entertainment. But my real beef was there are those of us who want to, because the flip side of it is we're also adding a quality to the platform that the entertainers aren't bringing. So don't you think you make your platform more diverse when, the YouTube's version of, you know, like when a Jordan Peterson goes live, I'm like, that dude, you should be driving traffic to his channel when he's live, hardcore, because there are millions of people who would pay attention to this and benefit from it if you could disrupt their space, which is I'm in my bubble. I'm not thinking about Jordan Peterson right now, but if YouTube would go the extra mile and draw me in, then you win, right? But they wouldn't do that. And that's when I started to make the predictions about they're going to go Netflix route, start selling and renting things. They did. And it's not like I predicted that. There were other smart people talking about that way before I started talking about it. But it was like, yeah, this is coming. YouTube wants to turn this into a money-making platform, and they're not going to get it done with the PewDiePies and the Markipliers. There's not enough people in the pipeline drawing enough attention that advertisers want to advertise. Because when you're PewDiePie and your audience is 13 to 18, they're not buying anything. Like, even though he's got millions of views, those kids aren't buying anything. The best thing you could do is advertise to their parents through the kids. Right, Mom, I want the blah blah blah. That could work. I mean, that's what Saturday morning cartoons were all about. Was distracting you with cartoons so you'd watch a commercial when the GI Joe, super base. Mom, get me the GI Joe super base. Those advertisements were really for your parents, not for you. Just like Axe Body Spray did a great job with that, where their whole marketing was when you look at their marketing, it's like, who are they marketing to? They're marketing to these young kids' mothers. They're not marketing to grown men. They're marketing to little kids' moms. And that's how they made their money. Adam Bell says, right, their algorithm is catered towards what is instantly engaging rather than what is fundamentally and deeply engaging. Sometimes. I mean, there are obviously exceptions to this rule. Millions of people have watched Jordan Peterson's lectures, which can get pretty lengthy. My specific beef was with they run a separate algorithm for live shows than if I just shot a 6-hour video and then uploaded it and we drove traffic to it. I was like, you're killing my ability because my talks don't require the viewer to be there live. And so I was like, I can't be the only one that would benefit if you do me a solid and promote this. Like, I'm not asking you to give me a million views. Just don't destroy my video after it's live. Because I'm a much better speaker when I'm live. I don't like rehearsed content. Like, I don't like emceeing shows. I do it sometimes, but a lot of times I have to read a script if I'm emceeing. I don't like that. I like just being able to talk. I may have some notes or some, presentation slides or whatever, but I don't want to have to stick to something I'm reading to people. And so being live is way more comfortable for me. And I'm like, give us, and there are, by the way, there are creators who have been able to make that work, but again, they're in the entertainment space. They weren't doing the type of stuff that I'm doing. See, Nancy says, you summed up our government. Watch the movie Brazil. It's an 80s Terry Gilliam film. Gilliam. Very post apocalyptic. I wonder if I've seen that already. Josh says, I have to get to bed. Good night, brother. Have a good one. Let's see. Makita says, I just took the Dark Triad. Narcissism 2, Machiavellianism 1.3, and Psychopathy 0. Good. All right. You guys are looking good. Adam Bell says, my Dark Triad scoring is funny. I'm unemotional, fearless, even manipulative. But I'm the high end. I am high end on humility and loyalty too. I'm self motivated, but need to be shot at a goal. Yeah, those things aren't mutually exclusive, right? Being unemotional and fearless, and having manipulation doesn't mean you lack humility. Those things, yeah, that I could see those things coexisting. De Niro's best performance is Brazil. Jack Martin says, so I heard you say to watch out for it earlier when someone said they had like 1.5 on psychopathy, and I got a 2.5. Is that bad? So it's a 2.5 out of what? I mean, technically you're shooting for 0 on psychopathy. Bad is really, you've got the answer to your life. Are you doing bad things and hurting other people and not feeling remorse over it? Then yeah, that's a bad thing, right? The score is just to show you that you don't score a 0, so you want to dig deeper. I wouldn't immediately start to say this is good or this is bad, right? Like if you were a Navy SEAL and you're telling me you didn't score 0 on psychopathy, I'm like, okay, yeah, you gotta be a little, you gotta be able to sleep at night, or not even, you don't even have to be a Navy SEAL. Even if you're doing some of the stuff I used to do, uh, if you were not 0 on psychopathy, I wouldn't be too freaked out. You got to be able to sleep at night sometimes after doing violence, right? So it's just the whole point of the test is to make you aware. And then what I always recommend people do, because most of your psychiatrists or your psychotherapists, whatever you go see, aren't going to know about that test or have taken it, but they can tell you a lot more about what it means to you personally. So that's why I recommend it. Is you get the self-awareness and then you take it to a doc and talk about it. Be like, yo, I've got some concerns. And usually if you're concerned that you have a thing, that's a good sign. You know, when I told my doctor I thought I might be autistic, she was like, shut up. I was like, what? I don't have feelings. She was, go. I treat people for a living. Dude, you are not autistic. What is wrong with you? I said, I don't know. People told me I should get checked. What people? Don't worry about it. Broken Super says, I don't remember my Dark Triad scores exactly. They were all very low. Highest was Machiavellian, which I think was a result of just knowing how people respond and using it to their benefit, not mine. Yeah, well, that would still be manipulation, even if you're manipulating them for good. That's, the test isn't really looking at manipulation as objectively bad. Like if I manipulate my kids to do good things all the time because I have to, because children are ridiculous. All right, listen, guys, I'm getting up out of here and going to bed. I love you all dearly. This has been a great talk, great podcast. If the podcast listeners are still listening at this point, you are a true gladiator, and I'm very appreciative for you in my life. Podcast listeners, definitely be sure, and YouTube fam, be sure to connect with me over on TikTok. My username there is Bryant Chambers Speaks, because some dude already took Bryant Chambers and doesn't make content, of course. But yeah, definitely get over there on TikTok. We're putting out new content pretty much every day because my doctor said that is a form of therapy for me. So guess what? That's what I was doing. I pray everybody got something great out of the initial part of this talk. To include I didn't want to cut off the question and answer session, even though I know it's going to cost me in views, but I really don't care because I can use this video and send it to a lot of different people where it'll help them, and then YouTube can do whatever it wants with it. But listen, I love you guys dearly. Always remember that we are stronger than I, and I'll see all of you tomorrow if you're following me on TikTok, and I'll probably be back on YouTube soon. Oh, also, if you guys think of anything you want me to talk about specifically, let me know. We'll make some content. All right? Stay strong, guys.